Thank you all for coming here, and thank you all who are coming to virtually by Zoom. A good number of our guests come from Los Angeles, so they're still trying to get here and all the traffic problems. We have translation, which our good friends are here. So if anybody needs translation, please go forward and ask for a headset so you can be following it as we proceed. It's my distinct pleasure to invite our president, Dr. Lori Varlato, to the podium, and then we go from there. Thank you. Thank you for being here, Lori.
Can I say it now? Welcome, and thank you for joining us at California Lutheran University for this timely and relevant conference, Separating Myths from Realities, Undocumented Immigrants in California. Guided by the expertise of Dr. Jamid Damui and moderated by Dr. Sabith Khan, two of our Cal Lutheran professors, this conference will illuminate the economic and social realities of undocumented immigrants in California, separating prevailing myths from pertinent truths that shape their lives and their contributions. Those of us gathered here today have the privilege of engaging in meaningful exploration of the economic and social realities faced by undocumented immigrants, from navigating legal complexities and forging pathways for economic prosperity and social inclusion. The issues at hand resonate deeply with our shared humanity. This conference also serves as a testament to our commitment to fostering dialogue, sharing knowledge, and embracing the rich diversity that defines our campus, our county, our country, and our world. At California Lutheran University, we believe that the simultaneous pursuit of truth and the exposure of alternative facts drive positive change. The Lutheran values that encourage us to see and serve our neighbor, remain intellectually curious and humble, and embrace diversity and inclusion are exactly the ones elected officials, legislators, policymakers, and advocates should embody as they attempt to craft evidence-based, just policies and practices. So as we embark on this collective journey of pursuing truth in ways that serve our neighbor, I invite each of us to engage with open hearts and minds, to listen deeply, and to seek to understand. May the work that we are privileged to engage in today make audible the voices whose stories still remain unheard. Thank you for your presence and your participation in this vital conversation. Your engagement underscores our collective commitment to building a future where all individuals are valued, respected, and empowered to thrive. I'd now like to welcome the Dean of the School of Management, Gerhard Appenfeller, to the podium.
Thank you, President Varlata. For those of you who have been here last year at the conference on undocumented workers, you may remember me telling you that story about an opinion piece that Dr. Damui and I had published in the Ventura County Star, which had been picked up by Yahoo News, and within 24 hours has gotten 700 comments on it. And as we were going through the comments, we were looking for that one positive one, because 700 comments were between negative and vicious on the issue of undocumented workers. This year, Dr. Damui published an opinion piece in the Ventura County Star. It got picked up again by Yahoo News, and the good news is no negative comments. So I see that as a good sign. Let's hope next year we have a lot of positive comments and that we have done our job educating the public about the myths and the realities of undocumented workers. And I also wanted to say in the last 20 years or so, but especially since the financial crisis in 08, 09, business schools have gotten a little bit of a bad reputation, right? So we've been criticized for putting profits over people, endangering the planet, exploiting entire societies and ecosystems. But things have changed a lot, and business schools today are very different. We understand our responsibility in educating students not only in the art of opposites between the short-sighted capitalism and the long view of what's good for mankind, but we educate them in a much more balanced and responsible approach that aims at creating livable societies and sustainable futures. At the School of Management in particular, we've become part of a global organization called Principles for Responsible Management Education that is affiliated with the United Nations Sustainable Goals, and that membership requires us to document our activity in the areas of the SDGs. And one of these activities, an important area, is the work that Dr. Damui and his Center for Economics of Social Issues do. We call him the conscience of the School of Management, as he keeps us real, he keeps us responsible, he reminds us of the unintended consequences of economic activity, the plight of the underrepresented and overlooked strata in our society, and the injustices that are suffered by them. But as you will hear today, Dr. Damui's research goes way beyond the human tragedies. He will show us today how one area of his work, the so important work on undocumented workers, links the functioning of our economy directly to the human aspects and the society that we live in, that we want to live in. By showing us how economics can help us to separate the myths from the realities, he takes us beyond just the populist policies that govern the public discourse on the topic. And he helps us to be a better business school at California Lutheran University by living up to our responsibility as a business school to be a business school that educates students on more than just the corporate mechanics and the profits. So I wish you all an inspiring morning, spirited discussions on the topic, and I want to thank my dear colleague, Dr. Damui, for bringing us together today and for doing his research, his important research on the topic. Thank you, Jamshid.
Thank you, Gerhard. Appreciate your comment and sentiment. I made a mistake when I said that there is a translation simultaneous, because I only said it in English. So our friends are going to say that in Spanish for those who didn't hear me.
Buenos días a todos. Tenemos en esta mesa el servicio de interpretación para aquellas personas que deseen escuchar la conferencia en el idioma español. Gracias.
Thank you. So let me start by thanking our sponsors. We have Economic Development Collaborative of Ventura County, who sponsored this conference. McCune Foundation sponsors us, and also Porto Wainimi. I thank Porto Wainimi twice because they also sponsored our study. And also Mike Teasdale, one of the good friends and colleague and social justice advocate in Ventura County. I want to also take this time to thank sincerely some of our colleagues, some of our leaders here. I want to thank Dr. Leanne Nelson, who's going to be here. She's going to be here from 9 to 11, so we'll see her, for her support of this activity. I want to thank the our Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Justice Office of the California Lutheran University. Maria Thayer, I think she's here somewhere. Also our Associate Provost for Global Engagement, Dr. Cristina Sanchez, who's here. I really thank Gerhard Apfeltauer, Dr. Apfeltauer, our dean, my good friend and colleague who really supports these activities within the School of Management, and will try to, as Gerhard put it, teach economics with a human face, maybe we should say with the face of life, which include human, plants, and animal. And that's really true, something that we have to really adhere to in order to remain, in order to be pertinent about what we do in our lives, on this planet. Let me see, what else? I want to thank colleagues who really helped us to put this together. Rosie Baker, Vinnie Torres, we've got, Hannah and Ali and William. They're all around here. I hope I didn't miss anybody's name here who really helped us, because without their help, we wouldn't be able really to do that. A lot of people who actually taught together to bring this together. I just saw that Dr. Khan arrived. We've got a lot of support, within the community. I see Winnie Lupka there, from the Buono Vecino. I hope I pronounced it correctly. If I didn't, I'll curse myself later on. And a lot of other thinkers, who really helped us. We got Alvaro here, who's going to be on the panel, so from Just Simper Global Alliance. So let me bring that, so there was a really collective effort. It's not just the effort of one or two people. It's a collective effort that brought us together. But as it is good to say, I want to also take this opportunity and recognize some of our either representatives or the representatives, elected representatives or their representatives here, some of the foundation who really are here, some of our educational leaders who are here, and generally speaking, people and groups and institutions who really are pretty much focused on these issues. So I'm going to miss some, and I'm going to really say that I'm really sorry if I miss it, and I apologize in advance. But I have a list here, and also when I saw people coming, I kind of made some changes. So we're going to, we're having here Dr. Jeanette Sanchez, the district director for the Assembly member Jackie Irwin. We've got Atticus Reyes here, who is the field representative for Assembly member Steve Bennett. We have got our good friend Andy Sobel here, who's the city council member from City of Santa Paula. We've got Laura Hernandez, the city council from Port Hueneme. We have got Chelsea Mayor, vice president from City of West Hollywood. I hope that she's here, because we never met each other before. And also Claudio Arman, the director of the McCune Foundation, Dr. Sebet Johnson, CEO of the county, Bernardo Perez, the board chair of the Ventura County Community Colleges. We've got Dr. Oscar Cobian, the interim president of the Oxnard College. We've got Dr. Antonio Castro, superintendent of Ventura Unified School Districts. We've got a good friend, Mike Stalachi, the chief philanthropy officer of the VCCF. And we have got, Jane Dalton Waters, board member of the House Farm Workers, two of board members. I haven't seen really John Griffin, but also we have Bruce Benson. They are the Social Justice Fund. And we have got, the Teresa Vega, assistant principal, Ventura County Office of Education, and Dr. Betty Stafford, co-chair of the CLU VC. If I missed anybody, I really apologize. I'm sure I did. And with that, without further ado, I want to start my presentation. But one important acknowledgement, it's not just acknowledgement, is my good colleague, fellow researcher, Ruslan Korchakin, who is pursuing a doctorate in educational leadership at Cal Lutheran. Ruslan is not new to us, been here 10 years ago, finished MBA and a Master of Science in Information Technology. Ruslan's contribution to this research is pivotal. He really helped everything from gathering data processing. Thank you very much, Ruslan, for all of the great work you've done. Okay, so I've done that. Not bad. We are actually even a little bit ahead of our time to start presentation. So let me see if I can get this right. All right, if I'm not getting it right, I'm sure Vinny would help me. All right, so I think that's better if I go there. All right, so we don't have one of those kind of mic that I can put here and walk around. Can you hear me through here? Okay. So let me just put it so I can see what I'm talking about. And so I can change the slide with this one, right? Yes. Okay. Thank you. Good to have you here. All right. So that is the last time that you can copy that QR and get a copy of the research. We also made one copy and put it on every table. And so please, it's important that it's 86 pages is not really, it's all pictures, a lot of graphs, but definitely my presentation will not do justice to the entire report that is prepared, and you can have access and read it. The PowerPoint presentation, it's a little, the fonts are small, but I will present it here so you can see it and we go over it. I really picked up some information from, we're doing it better, okay. So I picked up some information that I thought can help us to focus on issues, share the information, and come to a conclusion. A lot of this study and what comes before, you can't hear him, yeah? Okay? I can see, okay, Will, is that better now? All right, okay, sorry. I'll get the hang of it. You see, I have to see, I also talk at the same time. Well, let me see. How about this? Is it better now? Can you hear me? Okay, right, so we solved the problem. Okay. So I really like to see you eye to eye. This is the problem. So I'm kind of just like this and then talking like that. So here is what we're really exploring. Many times when we talk to people, Gerhard mentioned the op-ed we published. There was a lot of questions there, and you could, as we do, we get comments and we can kind of cluster them, then we can thematize them, then we can see what was it that these 600 said, okay? Forget some of the swearing things and other things, calling us, dumb PhDs or something like that. That's okay, fine. But what was there, to be honest, after analyzing that 600, came out that there are severe, strong, undeniable misconceptions about undocumented immigrants. So here is, if there is hope for people who would receive information, think and maybe change, so there is room for more work. If you see what this conference is about, it's about the stat issue. So if we can inform, if we can bring issue, if we can be convincing in a way that shows that we're not really making up, because news are usually made up, unfortunately. But if you can bring things which are real, you can give the evidence, you can present it with the sources, then you have a chance that people will think about it, and maybe you will change minds. Okay, with that in mind, this is what really we have brought for you. So we're going to look at immigrants as a part of families, the broader families in California. We're going to look at the participation, that's not the general title, like participation in labor markets, or labor force. We're going to look at the economic impact, and we're going to look at tax contribution. Why am I separating tax contribution from economic impact? Because it's the same thing, because of emphasis. I wanted us to have emphasis on tax contribution, okay? Because this is one of those myths. Oh, they grab our tax money, they rob us, and all of that. Absolutely the contrary, okay? It's not true. So when you look at these issues, when you bring evidence, maybe you can change your mind, okay? There's always hope. And then what comes out of this discussion? What comes out of this discussion is interconnectedness between undocumented immigrants and the rest of California. So that's important to realize, that's important to come to agreement, okay? And then how to bring the integration of undocumented immigrants. This is what we're really looking at, okay? With that, there are 4 of these maps on the report, and there are 3 here that I really put it there. The first one is the foreign-born. just like me, okay? So you have the foreign-born here. So you look at it in California, around 27, a little less because these are 2019 figures, around 27% of Californians are foreign-born. You have a lot of them in actually School of Management. We're all foreign-born there, okay? So Gerhard is one too. So a lot of us here. So if you look at the second one, am I doing it right? Vinny is stuck. Okay. All right. Okay. All right, we'll come to the second one.
Yeah, it's working.
All right, good. The second one is the, again, they're all actually presented per 1,000 population. So this is undocumented immigrant. If you look at how many or what percentage of that is in California, it's 7%. And you can see our county, other counties around, you can see them all there. This is very, very important. Why? Because this, if you look at that long title is on the top, it says number of undocumented immigrants ages 15 or older living with a U.S. citizen and non-citizen children, okay, age 18 per 1,000. So what does that mean? It means families. It means families that are undocumented regardless of a particular label. They are families. So what is in California? That's about 9.4%. In our own county is just about over 10%, and other places that you can see there. All right, is that enough? No. We'll go further. This one actually is very interesting, and it may resonate with a lot of people here, because this one is about what? It's about children, right? You know what we say? Children are our future. Think about it. These are children. What the figure tell us? It tells us that 29.2%, I don't have to really look at it because I remember that it was printed in my mind. 29.2% of children, Hispanic children, live with undocumented parents. Think about it. 30% almost. And let me just go with some of the stuff that I'm going to really repeat a few times later, now, that my mind is fresh on it. How can we put our children into fear of ICE? Bluntly. We don't have to really kind of beat behind the bush. Right there. How can we have the fear of ICE in their hearts? What would that do to their future? What would that do to the future of this state, our cities, our country? So look at the numbers, in kind of general, 17.4%. Look at the Asians, others. These are real figures. It's about life, okay? Let's go further. And by the way, usually sometimes I speak very fast. I've been told that many times. So I'm trying to speak not really too fast. But I thought I'd just write on the edges, okay? So the kind of gist of the thing, that you see in the graph or the table is also written there, okay? And sometimes, I got a little bit carried away. You'll see it later on. So if you go here, this is another one. So they talk about undocumented immigrant. They talk about, you just arrived, like 2 years ago. Now, there's 2.7 million, according to the Migration Policy Institute. 31% of them been here for more than 20 years. So that was the theme of the last conference. What does it take to call a place a home? Think about it. More than 20 years. 72% been here for what? For more than 10 years. So we're talking about Californian or US people, general, without label. Cool. Oh, the other one. The children, 4.2%. So what is the other significance of this thing here? I'm sorry, this is the age. The other significance of this number is that they are working people. they are age of participating in labor market. And why is that important? Because we are aging state and country. I mean, well, I did this report some years ago for Ventura Community Foundation, long-term care. We got the figures for this county by 2060. Well, I thought that, sometime, instead of giving percentages, put it a little bit more directly. And about 30-some years from now, in this county, which is not the same, different in other places, in California, for every 2 kids under the age of 15, you've got one guy who is 85 years or older. And what is the situation now? Very different. Very different. We have something that's called support ratio. We take certain ages, divide them by certain ages, and we come up with a ratio, and then we interpret the ratio. So here is a case for you. Right now, for that kind of care, the figure is around about 6. And about 20-some years, it becomes 2.3. What does that mean? It means we're going to take care of ourselves. And, by the way, talking about age and getting older population has other implications, what I teach in my microecon class, okay? Who saves? Children don't save. Older people don't save. The younger working age save. So when an economy gets older, you have a reduction in saving. And in any macroecon class that you took or didn't, it goes the basis of what? Investment. So, don't look at, the age of the T. So it gives you opportunity to adjust. So put it this way. They are participants in the labor market. They are providing opportunity for adjustment in time and the rest of it. Okay, so I could really go a lot more about it, but I have other things to say. Okay, so let's go on. So this one, sorry, I kind of look at I think I talked about this in advance. This is, now I said, what happened to that slide? Okay, that is the age, that is the number of years that undocumented immigrant being here. I already explained that, so I don't have to go there. So go to the next one. So here again, we're looking at another myth. Undocumented immigrants, primarily in agriculture, they are not educated. Well, look at this chart. What does that tell you? It tells you exactly what it is out there. So if you look at educational attainment by bachelor, graduate, and professional, we have 339,000 undocumented immigrants who are in this category. All right? So if you look at educational attainment for the population in mind, that's 15%. Given, it's less than the US born. But you can't just dismiss it. So if you put that number, that means almost, if you take, for example, Ventura County, that's a little bit more like 40% of Ventura County population, even with the latest numbers. So, and then about, either having a high school diploma or equivalent, that is about 48.5%, if you add them all together. Okay, let's move on. Labor market. So here we're looking at, we kind of alluded to that earlier on, but here is, maybe a little more succinct. So we're talking about the civilian population ages, we're talking in the labor force. So it's 69.2%. If you look at the report makes a comparison between the labor force participation on undocumented immigrant and the general population. The general population is about just over 63%. Undocumented immigrant are 69%, okay, labor force participation. Well, it's quite, they are in the age, for one thing, that different, with the general population also need to work. And yes, so they're employed. And by the way, the rate of unemployment is higher than the rate of unemployment in the general population. And these are, again, 2019 figures. One thing about, when you go from like 2019, 2020, or 21, a lot of these issues that, I bring to your attention, they are structural. I mean, they change, but not really over a year or two. That kind of bear this in mind. So let's move on. So here are something that, again, primarily in agriculture. Well, put it this way, yeah, you will see another figure that 46% of the GDP, contribution to agricultural GDP, yeah, 46% are from undocumented immigrants, but only 15.5% of undocumented immigrants are in agriculture. So you know that they all work, in agriculture. They contribute, they carry agriculture on their shoulder, put it this way, in terms of labor force, but they're not all there. It's only 15.5%. So what are the other? The other numbers are there. For example, you can see it, in retail trade, you can see it in manufacturing, construction, pretty much everywhere. So you can see that this is the kind of spread. The title of this conference and the title of this talk, the title of that report in some extent is Separating Myth from Realities. So we live our myth, a lot of us. Oh, in this room, I'm pretty sure it's not the case. But, this is important for us to really look at this stuff and see what the realities are. Okay, so let's move on. So this one is, it's another number. Oh yeah, this is very important. Comparing wages. We took median wage. So you look at undocumented immigrant median wages, again, 2019, it's $13. Look at US born, 26. Well, some say that, but you see, the reason is that maybe the educational attainment, that really contributed, maybe other things, different industry that there are. Yeah, they do contribute, 100%. Well, the reason that I kind of left it there, because if I want to really do a research, I have to do a lot more on that to kind of filter it in the way it's possible to filter. But there's no, without shadow of doubt, there is wage depression on that. So you can't get that kind of numbers without it. So 13 to 26. So here, we go economic impact. Last time, when I put the output impact, and then the question was that, what do you mean by output impact? So this time, I'm sure that I'm going to really exhaust you when you read the report, detailed definition of what output is, what value added is, what these things are. So we don't want to really leave you in sort of doubt about these things, So if you really read the report, I hope you do, or at least parts of it that you're interested, it's all been explained. So $512 billion. That's not direct contribution of undocumented immigrants. So what's the significance of this number? The significance of this number is that undocumented immigrants' work contribute to creation of $512 billion in the county. So, more detail, we're talking about what's the difference between value added and output, which is explained, not difficult, pretty clearly explained in the report, and also in the PowerPoint presentation. There also the issue is what we call indirect and direct. So what we did, how do we get these numbers out? We use a model which is called IMPLAN. When I say we, Ruslan and I. So IMPLAN is a software model which estimate regional output. And what they do is that you put them, in the input-output model, and you run it, and what comes out of it is that you have a direct impact, and then you have indirect, and then you have induced. So indirect is like between businesses, induced is when we spend, the salary we receive. And then you get all of these things run together, and then you find, what is the overall impact. So every time you see it, you have what? Direct, indirect, and induced. So 512 billion is the output contribution through all these different cycles of impacts. But if you want to be more succinct, then we go what is called value added. So value added is basically like industry contribution, really. Make the long story short. Again, I wrote a little bit on that. Being a teacher, you get carried away, usually explain things a little more than usual. Well, that's, part comes with the job. But I did explain because I don't want to leave things, in kind of vague, so put it there. So what is that? That comes to 52, roughly, around $52 billion contribution of undocumented immigrant in California. What would that be in 2019? That would be 4.9% of California GDP, okay? 4.9%, okay? Now, let's move on. I will put also the induced and indirect, but I don't really bring them up right now. It's just there to tell you that. Why is it important? Because, you know, there is a theme here which is called interconnectedness workplace. When you work, you're not just supporting your own job, you're supporting all those industries or come to you industries that you feed to, in and out. That's what input-output is. So you want to see that, you know, because I want to really bring out interconnectedness in this conference time and time and time, so we can understand where we are in the kind of big picture, so to speak. Okay, let's move on. Oh, this one. This one is the economic impact in different industries. So there's something here I have to really explain, that why we have 11. Well, 11 were because the data that we used come from Equity Research Center. By the way, we have, you know, Ty. I don't know if Ty is here or not, because he's on our panel. He's a data scientist from Equity Research Center and USC. And also we have data from Migration Policy Institute that we used. So, by the way, our panel members, with the exception of Alvaro, that come from they all come from outside this place, this area. So 3 of them come from Los Angeles. So hopefully they get here on time. So let's go back again to this chart. So 46% of agriculture are contributed by undocumented immigrant. So if you go to construction, that is 18%. Then you go to manufacturing, 7%, transportation, 4%, retail trade, 17%, and so on and so forth. Okay, so you can see them all there. Then I thought that maybe it would be a good time to see what exactly is the structure in California. So I added that one from the Bureau of Economic Analysis to 2022. Doesn't matter, you know, it's still structurally different over these years. So you can see that in California, what are the contribution of different industries, okay, sectors. Oh yes, like most economies of like California, the finance, you know, real estate, you know, other things, you know, insurance formed the biggest block, and then information, and then finally somewhere around there, education, others. So you can see, you kind of make a comparison, so you get a sense of it, you know, where that 4.9% come from. All right, so continuing with that, this is also has a very important significance. What's the significance of this? The significance of this is the following. Again, going back to interconnectedness. Well, we used, again, data. So we used how many of these 2.7 million actually work. So it's roughly about 1.6 million. And then, so we go there, and again, we look at what is called, you know, direct, indirect, and induced. What do we find there? What we find is very interesting, that out of the work of the undocumented immigrant, right, there are 1.25 million additional jobs created. So maybe one of those people who were telling that how done we are by writing that op-ed, job depends on the work of undocumented immigrant. We are interconnected. We are interconnected. That's how an economy works. That's how society works. They're not in separate boxes from each other. No. There is no evidence of that. We're human beings. When we live together, we contribute to each other. We benefit from others and benefit others. And so this is important. Again, coming back about interconnectedness. 1.25 million additional jobs come from the work of the undocumented immigrant. Move on. Labor income. Well, labor income, again, you can see, you know, with the direct and indirect, so that's about just over 99 billion. And then I'll explain exactly what labor income means, because it includes a lot of other components. It's not just what goes in their pocket. So you can see the detailed explanation of that. I don't think you can see it, you know, from the small print that you have on the PowerPoint, but you can see it definitely in the report. Do please There is one copy of that on every table, so you can grab it and look at it there, you know, and see that better. Or, you know, from your iPhone or your computer that you downloaded the report, so you can see a lot more information there. Okay. So we go here on the tax. So I really took tax outside that because there's a lot of, again, myth about tax. And, well, you know, they take our tax money, they are takers, they abuse, are very open, you know, borders. I'm not really, by the way, I'm just repeating what they're saying. I don't believe in all this stuff anyway. It's just, you know, just repeating what you hear. Oh, they come here, take advantage of us and all of that stuff. That's another big myth. So I said, okay, let's see what exactly is their contribution. What you see here is exactly what you see in this particular chart. So we have here Social Security taxes, okay? We have got here also the personal tax. And then, you know, there's a bunch of other things, you know, kind of compact together here, other personal taxes that pay at state level. And Social Security by the employers and Social Security by the employees themselves. So I kind of netted it because here is the kind of principal issue. If your employer pays Social Security for you, it's not they're giving you a gift. It's based on your work, okay? So you could really say that, you know, the Social Security contribution from an employer is really coming from you. But in general, you're not paying it from your pocket because the way we report the paychecks, you know, and the way that we put, you know, deductions, other things, you know, come out, you know, how much do you really pay? Well, in 1040, when you fill up, you put how much you really actually paid and what security you paid. But obviously, you know, it's also your employer. So make the long story short, if you really net it out, it's about $17.5 billion that go from them. Because say, how do they really pay that? Well, there are two things. And again, this is one with a lot of, you know, notes on the side. So this is another that I want you to really find that, you know, in the report and read it properly from there. So here are the just what you see written on that edge. So one thing is that, well, 70.5 roughly is what they pay. So to taxes, Social Security payment, other things, you know, like for example, you pay for cars, for house, for other things, and they're all lumped together, broken down, you know, in details. So, but when you put all of this together and you kind of look at it, you say that, what do they really get for it? Well, here is the case. Here is the case. They means undocumented immigrant and the employers pay together about $9.3 billion. Do they get a dime of it? No. They're not entitled to Social Security payment. They're not entitled to food stamps. They're not entitled to Pell Grant. They're not entitled to any of this stuff. Nothing. Child support, nothing. So, some of you heard me on the CLU. They are makers. They subsidize us. They're not takers. Clearly. This is one of the other myths that unfortunately we don't get to talk about. Huh? All we talk about is, you know, crimes and other things and tax money being taken, you know. No. There's no single evidence for any of this stuff. Nothing. It's just made up. And you know why they made up, okay? Why they make that up. Okay. So this is, again, find this one in the big report and read it from there because there's a lot there to be kind of, what they call it, unpacked. So we go on, okay, so I think we talk about that in that one. So I wanted to single them out, you know, so I kind of took it out and then put, you know, two charts there, so making sure that we really pass on that important critical information, okay. So what that bring us together? So we call it, you know, the interconnectedness between undocumented immigrant and every Californian. So let me go over this. When you think about California, okay, I lived a significant, well, I say the biggest portion of my life. Yeah, I lived in California for 38 years. So one of the important things about California is that it's a place where immigrants and others contribute. So I was interested when I was doing the research, so I looked at some information that in 1850, so 170 years ago, there's a website you can put, how many people really living in California, but they were born outside. At that time, the highest proportion of people who lived in California, by the way, people who lived in California and were born in California, in that part of the history was number 5 on the scale. So the first one was New York, by the way. And the second one was Mexico, okay? So then, on that database, I had access to 2018, roughly 170 years ago. By the way, till 2010 was not that far ago, the proportion of people, so I'll repeat again, till 2010, the proportion of people living in California, born in California, was not the, so to speak, the majority, okay? So it was not like, in 2018, so it kind of passed 50, that threshold, And then, so the proportion of people born, not necessarily in other countries, but in other states also. So it just shows, what California ties or relationship is with migration and immigration both, okay? So in 2018, yes, 22 million of California at the time, so which is more than 50% were born in California and living in California. And guess what was the second highest? Mexico. 4 million point 1 or 2. The exact figure is in your in the report. You can look at it. So this is California. So when we say immigrants contribute, art, culture, entrepreneurship, creativity, everything else, it's not a myth. It's a reality. Undocumented immigrants are a part of that. No doubt about it. And if you look at California, so why are we talking California about this? We talk about immigration integration in California. Yeah, the term is immigration integration. Repeat that. And that is because if there is, well, a few maybe, but one of the distinct states where these things may have a far better chance is California. So I think it's something that we should be really feel very good about it. So this is a historic review of migration, immigration, and what exactly population of California constitutes. So I wrote more about it in the report. You can read it. And the references, you can go there. So what else? The other part of this interconnectedness, as I explained in detail, is that life, the children. Okay, it's important. So I want to repeat that. 29.2% of Latino kids live with undocumented immigrants. Okay, let's say 30% to give a round number. Asians actually 13 point something, 4 or 5. Altogether about 17.4%. So children are our future. Look at these numbers. Again, I want to repeat that. We need to bring peace in the life of our children. We have to invest in them. And that thing about not having what they call entitlement, access to entitlement. We've been working with some of you folks here on establishing a universal high quality, I have to repeat that, establishing a high quality universal early childhood education. VCCF headed that. And I want us to kind of think about that how important that is. That's investing in children. So I'll repeat that again at the end. Look, reaching people is important. Having an entitlement is just a step one. It means a lot, but it doesn't mean that you get it. So how do they put, entitlement to food stamps? I work with data all the time, as a part of my daily activity working with data. So here is a number. Based on your economic status, you're entitled to food stamps. Does that mean you can get it? No. If you're undocumented immigrant, you're not getting it. And by the way, those who get it, do they really actually get it? Really make cash on it? Child support, educational support part, not just child support. That's another thing. So we have a state entitlement. We have federal entitlement. Just for I'm just going to mind of time. Yeah, I got time. So if you really look at these numbers, I kind of made that example in some of the other occasions that I were fortunate to have some people around on the issue. That is like, wow, federal government gives 14.5 or somewhere around there. I didn't check the latest number. Support for children, child education, early education, and the state government is kind of opened that a lot because those really is a poverty line, but the state is far greater than poverty line. In fact, our latest work with Jerusalem work on that was 331% of the poverty line. You get entitlement to getting money from the state for sending your child, to early childhood education. How many people do it? We calculated it. We wrote a paper on it. How many? So it looks like this. You have a bank account, money in it. You don't have a check to write against it. So do not get too optimistic about entitlement. How entitlement gets actually materialized, taken advantage of, needs assistance, help, reaching people, helping them. I think there's an enormous amount of potential for establishing type of nonprofit that can reach out, help people, bring them. Like, when I was working the UN, the NGOs, yeah. So you need to create that kind of facilities to be able to take advantage of. Otherwise, entitlement are to be written in the budget and to be forgotten and not really used at all. Some of you work on that, you know what I'm talking about. So having entitlement doesn't mean you get it, Like it takes a lot of effort, to do that. Anyway, even if you are entitled. So those things are about children and how they're, the kind of the issue of interconnectedness that I brought up here and I talk about it. And then finally, their impact on the GDP. Okay. So I explained that, a few times, so I want to really finish this in about 10 minutes. If I have more time for Q&A, we'll put like 15 minutes. I think we're going to end up with 20 minutes for Q&A. So that means I have to really finish that in about 10 minutes, which I will. Okay. So these are facts. These facts, I hope, can help us to demystify, to kind of take the kind of myth and really bring realities to it. So we can understand what is that we are. So I really hope that if you haven't really heard this thing before, when you go out of this conference today, you say that, oh, gee, I never thought that was the case. I hope a lot of you will come up with a lot of that things in your mind, because that is where the change is to happen. To know first, to be informed first, with reliable information, and then the rest of it comes in its own good time. Okay, so what do we have to do? So again, there are pages of that on the report, but here, take the fear away from families. That means, clearly, is this. Undocumented immigrants are not to be handed over to ICE. Okay? Now, people do crimes, doesn't matter, you're documented, undocumented, or whatever, you get, caught on that. These are just knowing, well, we can report, to ICE, and ICE work is to go through the process of deportation. So that's a very important thing. So, directing efforts towards social and economic inclusion. Legal. We'll hear in our panel on that. We've got an excellent expert on that coming up. Financial support by creating financial facilities. okay? We live in an economy that without having access to finance, we're really limited what we can do, you know? So just look at our life. So that is, in California, anywhere around the United States, an important issue to create that type of facilities. Extended to undocumented immigrants. I wish we had somebody from the community bank here. I don't know whether we have it or not. We have one in Oxnard. So important for those community banks to think about this stuff, to see what they can do. You know, there are ways to be done, you know, so financial assistance, important. Legal help, important. Language barriers to be taken away. And then again, you know, some ideas. For example, any of these kind of community meetings that we have or hearing or conferences, the first essential budgetary item is to have interpretation, okay? Simultaneous, 2 ways. I was a little bit, you know, not very happy to kind of heard from Vinny that, you know, people who are actually watching us on Zoom do not have that stuff. You know, next time we'll fix it. But so there, yeah, you have to be able to communicate here exactly, and with the numbers that we said, that obviously, you know, ability to understand and speak and learn and receive information in Spanish is important. So, well, why we have so much myth? Why we have so much misconceptions? I don't have to talk about that. We know why. Take us away from our real economic problems. Divert attention to other things. Scapegoating. Taking people to think about something else. Because after all, when a significant, I can't really hesitate to say majority, significant proportion of people live check by check, paycheck by paycheck. You got to explain to them that so much prosperity exists in this country for so few. We need to talk about that. Well, immigrants, I don't know, cultural war, whatever woke means, you know, I still don't know what the hell that is, but those kind of stuff. So bring them on, you know, because the best thing is, you know, to divert attention, to bring another thing, you know, maybe kind of engage them, you know, and put the blame on them. So we know that. That's very clear there. So be mindful of the fact that immigrants and undocumented immigrants serve as a scapegoat. So I bold that. So what do we do in order to overcome that? Those who are sociologists here, or I mean, all disciplines of humanities are here. Economics is definitely one of those. This model of anti-oppressive practice, or AOP, got some quite important attraction. So there's a lot of literature on that, but I kind of put some gist of it here so we can really understand that. So the core of that approach is that we have to kind of break down the kind of oppressive system which prevent people from engaging, from participating, from learning, from making themselves, you know, their opinion, other things known, their wishes expressed. So that's really the principles of AOP, because oppression is really pervasive. Sometimes it's very hard to recognize, okay? So the core of these type of changes are AOP, to be very, very clear about it. So, for example, we have DEIJ, we have a very good one here too, Lutheran, so charge them. The DEIJ were taking a very important active role based on those principles, anti-oppressive, you know, practice, which they do, by the way, but be more overt about it, you know, be clear about it, county level, every other level. So anti-oppressive practice in DEIJ is very important. For example, we have, you know, Hispanic studying institutions, which Lutheran is one of them. It's very important to really take that and carry it, you know, not really saying that we're not doing it, but I'm saying it's very important that you bring, you know, that type of modality, that type of thinking, that type of structural, type of policy setting, activities based, other things, based on AOP is important. So what is that? So basically is that, by the way, community hearing, particularly involving sheriff department. We've got Willie Lopka here. I mentioned him once. Well, he's a really very important in terms of social justice person. We have, I don't know whether Cynthia, Dr. Duarte is here or not, for our Center for, thank you so much. I was just trying to remember, the abbreviation of that. Yes, that is very important. We have that. I saw Cynthia, I heard Cynthia. So you're here. Good to have you here. All right. And so these are the things that we really have to be very, very meticulous about it. Develop that. Bring it on. And we do have. We have. The meetings. That are there. That hearing with the sheriff department was really eye-opening for me. Well, it's very interesting. I had a little presentation based on my previous study there. I think we should really do that because we have to talk to each other. These things are does not really exclude anybody. Conversation, and those conversation has to be really frank. Not beat behind the bush. Bring out some information, some data, share it, discuss it, bring it together. So we help undocumented to feel protected, come out and have more significant presence in the community life. And by the way, one figure, because the question of what they call legalization, if that's one terminology to use, but basically is path to citizenship. I like that better. There have been laws in 2006, 2013. Lawmakers don't pick it up. You know why? Because of a lot of misconception about it. They fear they may lose, the support of their electorates. That's a possibility. But the important thing here is about these issues are that we need to really discuss them in the community, we bring them on and talk about it. And in all of those conversations, in all of those meetings, there has to be people that we are discussing their life. If they're not present, that meeting lacks significantly. Because people that you're supposed to bring positive change have to be present. They will tell us what the themes are. We don't create for them. So if you're researching, here is a good tip for your research. You listen to what the problems are before formulating it in your mind. So their presence in every room is absolutely vital. I contacted some of my friends that helped them, and I even opened up, say that just ask those community members to come here, we'll waive the fees or whatever and welcome them. And I insisted on that, So we have people that come here and bring, their stories and bring their vision, bring their mind, their ideas to those who are already talking about them. And with that, all right, not too bad actually. Yeah, we got 20 minutes for Q&A. I thought we have 15 minutes, so done. My pleasure. So, please ask me any question you want. I'll try to answer it in any way I can. I'm going to put this aside.
Well, I'd like to congratulate you for your studies. Incredible. Eye-opening. And especially for me because I have a tax preparation operation for myself. And a lot of the figures that you showed here are true. A lot of the workers are undocumented, pay taxes. Even without a Social Security, they contribute to the Social Security fund, the Medicare fund, and they never get anything back. I know it's a fact because it's in my practice. I do that and I see that. And also they're eager to contribute. The workers, they want to work and they bring their family to do their taxes. They want to do their taxes. Unlike many people think they don't pay taxes. They do pay more than many others. So that's something I'd like to congratulate you for these studies.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
The other work that I do, I work with my boss, Kay Gabbard. We work from the Malibu Labor Exchange, dealing with day laborers, and we see that. They want to work. They're workers. They want to contribute to this country. So these figures are incredible to me to see reflected the work that we do in figures. No myth, figures. So thank you for your work.
Pleasure. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks for being here and sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you, sir.
Come on, I've got 20 minutes.
Hi there. My name is Gabrielle, and I'm with House Farm Workers, and we are working on a survey of our own. And so when I saw the numbers that you had for the participation in labor market, I was just wondering if you had a breakdown by counties. I saw that you had the complete number for California.
Yes.
Okay, wonderful.
The
So
answer
I
is
will.
yes. Yeah, we have it for county. In fact, the 4 counties available. What we had last year, our Central Coast focus, we had it for Santa Barbara and for Ventura. We used those numbers. But yes, we have it. There are some places, see, let me tell you that, there are some small places. I mean, counties, if you think about counties, that every county is like us, or even, a few 100,000, it's not. We have counties that the number of people are really, really small, So when you have that kind of data, although we pull them over 5 years, still, you won't be able to. But for majority, yes, the answer is yes.
Wonderful. We'll reach
Pleasure.
out to you. Thank you.
Pleasure. Okay.
Good morning, Dr. Dumuy. Nice to see you again. My name is Cynthia Salas. Thank you for this wonderful presentation. You pointed out, I think, to a lot of inequities that everyone in this room is aware about. But specifically speaking about our undocumented field working children. We strive and we push them to strive for higher education. We continue to share the narrative that the education is the biggest equalizer, right? But when we encounter our students moving up to the next phase of their academic journey, the barriers of economics is an issue, and even if they do acquire scholarships from whatever universities they might attend, there's still barriers in terms of acquiring books, building communities. Even though there may be programs, these programs are underfunded, or the programs are so heavily regulated by federal government that it creates more barriers than opportunities. So I would like to thank you for sharing this presentation, but also asking those that wear leadership hats in this room to make systemic change, whether it's an institution or at the government level, to champion that change with the information that you provided today, and maybe if possible, provide maybe some suggestions of how they could start championing that in their prospective tiers of government. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Let me just say a quick comment. I really like that you brought it to the attention of the leaders here and outside. By the way, we have all of these videos and we'll send them around, around the whole state. But you're quite right about that. But there are certain things that we can do in institutions. For example, when I mentioned, the DEIJ, I was really referring to what exactly is that they can really put attention on that, how we can possibly facilitate that. There are grants for these things, which are based on. But you're quite right. We have to be able to remove those barriers that prevent undocumented immigrant children from having this opportunity. I totally agree with that.
Good morning, Dr. Mui. You're up next.
Sure.
My name is Marin Kakachev. Thank you so much. Always a pleasure to hear you speak. So 2 quick questions for you. One's a myth and misconception that you can maybe dispel with your data. So there's often this misconception that with undocumented, like you said, they contribute so much, but they don't get access to these benefits, right? The conversation is often medical. So often there's this misconception of, they're drawing all these medical resources, but they're not paying into the system. So you've very clearly shown how they do contribute to the system. So could you expand a little bit on how sort of the medical piece works, if that was part of your research? And then as a separate question, one of the things that really struck me as a foreign-born naturalized citizen myself was the wage inequality you showed, right? Natural-born citizens are $26 an hour
Yes.
Naturalized are 24, and then obviously undocumented are much lower. There seems to be this notion that immigrants, regardless of whether you're naturalized or not, tend to be much more entrepreneurial. After all, you
Yes.
took the risk to leave your life and show up here. So what's the risk of starting a business? So when it comes to investments, what do you think the impact would be if
Sure.
there is access to legalization, and what that would do with investments?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for your question. Let me just respond to that. And again, in the report, I kind of mentioned them, so I kind of refer you back to that. The first part is this. When we talk about immigration integration, obviously, path to citizenship was the best way. But then again, we go to be pragmatic. What's going on now, whether there's a chance of that anytime soon or foreseeable future. So the integration means that taking away those barriers. Okay, what I mentioned, for example, in this presentation talked about, helping those who in educational institutions. That's something that can be done, and it's actually done. It's not that we're going to do it tomorrow, but you can expand it. You can extend it. We can do a lot more there, in order to do that. I mean, every time that you see that, what is the proportion of people who decide to go to colleges? I mean, a lot of people think, that's something that people just decide that they really want to go to university or not. No, economic circumstances bring that out. Even when they are at university, economic circumstances really make them succeed or not succeed, or have challenges. I mean, the socio-economic is not just a word. It's a reality of life. So we have to be really expanding, extending. I refer to, for example, two things, HSI and, IJ. It's clear. These are important things, within education institutions. Rogers community, yeah. Educational authority, we've got some of them here. You got to think about that. So, put it this way. You have ways, which would be, for the lack of a better term, it would be like you are compensating for the deficit that exists. Figure out what that would be, and it's not difficult, so you can do it. On the wages, that's very interesting. I'll refer you to a study done by, I'll refer them again. It was between university and two other institutions. And they had, I think 2020 or 2021, they put this study out. And UC Sacramento, I think, with two other institutions with them. And they created 4 pathways. So I will just share one of them, which is that a path to citizenship. The path to citizenship, in their calculation, created $1.7 trillion increase in GDP in the next 10 years. Creation of 430-something thousand additional jobs. So, why? Clear. You can participate in the market without fear. You can negotiate your wages. Don't have to accept it. Don't be fearful that if you do something, ICE is going to come and find you. Fear. Take fear out. So I'll repeat again. How can we take fear out? So our conversation with Sheriff Department is essential. Got to have this discussion. Got to bring senses to this stuff. And when you do that, then participation in the labor market is not with fear. Participation in the labor market is with choice. See, one of the things that inspired me since I was a student of economics till today, which has been, God knows, more than 50 years, is the following. What is economic development? Economic development means enhancing people's choice. Who said that? Amartya Sen, 94 years old, professor of Oxford, Harvard, thinker, philosopher, whatever, Amartya Sen. He has an example. He had developed the whole, system of capability approach, CA. And what is he talks about? He says that here, so you give a bicycle to somebody. There's no use unless you learn how to ride it. That's it. We have to free those who can stand for their own benefit, negotiate for their own benefit, participate for their own benefit. And that is a part of immigrant integration, which has to be done on the community level everywhere. Thank you for your question.
Hello, my name is Primitiva Hernandez, and I'm the new executive director for the 805 Undocumented Fund since January 2nd, so very new on the job. And I want to thank the table out there that mentioned about the supporting undocumented students, because I went to school solely on scholarships. So that's a great point, and thank you for everything you do. The second point is, and I haven't read the report, I'm sorry, but if you do mention it in there, disaster relief. Because through the 805 Undocumented Fund, what we're mainly known for is disaster relief for undocumented immigrant households in Santa Barbara and Ventura County. And as you know, or many of you know, FEMA does not trickle down to undocumented households. So right now we're going through a crisis situation in Ventura County where, because of the floods, there's a crisis situation for many households. 805 Undocumented Fund is currently fundraising for financial relief assistance for many of these households that were impacted. We have a goal of fundraising a little over $60,000. We are halfway through our goal. So I want to thank the philanthropy in this room, because right now that assistance is only being able to be provided thanks to the philanthropy. But philanthropy cannot be the answer. So since this video is also going to be shown to local authorities, government, I don't know if there's any government in the room, but I think it's important to know that they also have a responsibility to bear, because as your report has shown it, the immigrant households contribute. And there's a lot of funding that is out there in the budget, and how can we make that be available to the households, the immigrant households that contribute to that in tax revenue and all of that, so that it doesn't fall on philanthropy. But right now it is, and I thank you for that. And if there's any philanthropy in the room that want to talk to me at the breaks, burgundy sweater, so just come and talk to me, because I need to talk to all of you. You know, we need to step up as a community and support these households. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here and bringing that. So yes, we have break, and even after that, please. And one part of this is just talk to each other and communicate, exchange information. Thank you. Yes.
Hello, my name is Aisha Agraz. I am a sophomore here at Lutheran University. I am on the pre-law track, double majoring in political science and Spanish, and minoring in the legal studies program as well as the university honors program. And it's really eye-opening to see your presentation, because I am the daughter of documented parents as well. And I have more of a question that might be a little bit more opinion-based for you. But I was just wondering, the FAFSA just changed, and I was just wondering why you think the FAFSA made it much harder for the children of undocumented parents to be able to apply to the FAFSA if undocumented individuals contribute so much to the economy. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to answer your question not based on intimate knowledge of your question. As you said, it's based on the general opinion that I think I have there. There are people here in the room, or maybe the panel can answer that question, you know, more succinctly, based on the changes that occurred. I can't really speak of something that I've not studied clearly, but give you my opinion. The opinion is that every time that we have what we call limited resources, which I'm really doubtful whether our resources are limited, or kind of totally are limited, they try to kind of make a kind of acceptable whatever. That's one part of it, which I don't think is applicable, in my opinion, again. What I think is the politics of it, to be honest with you. I think a lot of the stuff, let me just be frank, why not? We're here, might as well be frank. I have nothing to lose by being frank, and I've always been like that. Let me be frank. Our politics, it's the real issue here. So where we make certain decisions, we check it 100 times based on how that was going to be seen by that, how it's going to be seen by this. Quite honestly, we have a lot of very good public servants, very good representatives, but not all of them. My opinion, by the way. It's not based on research. And they make this decision based on what really suits them or not. So every time when these things change, you have to, this is one way of looking how that changed, where that came about, how that allocation was done, why it was shrunk, what was the conversation. If you're a student of these kind of things, you can have access to those conversations and find out. But just as a person who doesn't have intimate knowledge about your question, I think it's politics play a role. Opinion.
Thank you. Thank you for your work. My name is Kay Gabbard, and I'm from the Malibu Community Labor Exchange, which is the day labor hiring site we have in Malibu. I'm wondering, I'm not sure who funded your research, but I'm wondering what your plans are for getting this information out to somebody other than the people sitting in this room.
I will answer your question. First of all, I, myself, Lutheran who work on that with me, others, we work at Lutheran. For this work, I don't receive any money, okay? I shouldn't, anyway. I love doing it anyway. So, but we have sponsorship towards the study, and the brother. We had Porto Bainimi actually contributed to this study. We had three other funders for the conference. We kind of asked them, we gave them a menu, which one you check off. And Porto actually checked off the one that would be for the conference and also the study. Our provost is here, Leanne, very generously, amidst of so many other financial problems that we all have, dedicated good money for this conference. I got two other colleagues here from the global engagement and also from the EIJ, who actually contributed to that. Well, those money are very important because we want to use that. So for payment, labor, no, there's no need for that. But for getting it to everybody, yes, we have facilities of, right now we're recorded. This is all again free for us because we are at CLU. But we have some other students that are here. They are coming from Professor Salimi's, students of the video film, they're making those films. We are going to really have these things all edited, put together. They're going to have a huge MailChimp coming again to you. So you're going to get everything here in terms of delivery, content, the big report, the PowerPoint presentation, the whole enchilada is going to be there, okay? And they're going to be sent to every single body in Sacramento. Every single assembly person, all of them. They got it, by the way, for the conference. And two of them sent their rep here. I acknowledge them. But we're going to send it everywhere. We're going to send it to all the city council people here and other cities here, which two of them are here. Well, a lot more should have been here. But anyway, so we're going to send it to them. We're going to send it to supervisors. We're going to send it to everybody. And these are the facilities that are provided by sponsors and by CLU, okay? You bet we'll do it. I'm glad to have you here, by the way. So I knew that you guys were coming. Yes, we will do it. I promise you that.
Good morning. Thank you for your presentation. I have a quick question. It's based on a point that was very interesting. You said that about 15% of the undocumented population has a professional degree, right? You said that's about like 339,000. Do you have any other comments about that? That kind of was very shocking to me, and I would love if you had more information on that.
Absolutely. So first of all, this is called educational attainment. Educational attainment has got a definition. It's not just as a proportion of the total population. Educational attainment is usually for ages of 25 more. Sometimes we actually adjust it. So you have to follow that definition that it is. However, that is the same thing. In the report, you see a comparison between the U.S. Kind of citizen, so to speak, and undocumented. So following that definition, that number is correct. How that happened? Yes. In fact, there was one reporter interviewed me this morning. I think he's here. But I was kind of trying to explain that the line wasn't that clear unfortunately, but here is the case. 31% been here for more than 20 years, right? So these are people went to the school, went to the high school, went to the college, received their degree, and are there. Yes, that number is correct. And what he says is, again, that when you talk about undocumented immigrants, do not think about undocumented immigrants as a kind of separated, segregated, totally cast aside. No. They have been here, they lived here, they became educated here, all the other things that happens to everybody else is happening to them. What we need to make their life easier to come out and be who they are, and hopefully we'll have a path to citizenship after all this bickering is over, which will never be over, but I hope sometime will be over, so we can go in that stage. Yes.
Hello, my name is Israel. I wear many hats in the community. I work with farm workers. I was skimming and listening, trying to take as much notes as I could. But first of all, I want to thank you for the data that you collected, because one comment that we have is that to look for resource and promote study and data gathering on undocumented immigrant. I think that is really, really important. We don't have a lot of data on our undocumented community and the impact that they have in our community, and I think this is very important. I hope that other university, other institution push for this, because it's much needed, especially for us to highlight the importance of undocumented individual. And the other comment that I had is that the participation of undocumented in agriculture, 50%, but the impact that they have on the industry is so high. And we saw this, especially during COVID, how the system was so fragile that when farm workers weren't able to work, how the food to the table and the whole agricultural system almost broke down because farm workers weren't able to work, and this was having impact. And now, like, how important farm worker issue continues to be important, especially since a lot of them are undocumented and don't have access to a lot of the resource and a lot of the other benefits that other folks have. So thank you very much, and I really enjoyed and I hope to go and dissect the study as much as I can.
Thank you so much. By the way, we have to kind of stop because we're getting to our coffee break, and then we have a fascinating panel coming up at 10:15. But let me just, about the data. The data, the original data, so I don't really get credit for it because the credit is due to two institutions primarily. Of course, we use other information. And one of them is the Equity Research Center of USC. I think we have got Dr. Leh here for that. We'll be in the panel. And we also have Migration Policy Institute. So by the way, I do invite you to open the report, find them, click on them, go there. There's plenty of information. What we did, we do the processing, analysis, and other things. That's obviously our work. But the basic data is available through those channels and other channels. Thank you, and we're going to have a coffee break. There was one question online, right? Okay, done. All right. So let's have a coffee break. We're back again at 10:15. Again, thank you.
Let me start off by introducing myself. My name is Sabit Khan. I'm the program director and an associate professor in the Public Policy and Administration, Masters in Public Policy and Administration program at Cal Lutheran. And the small anecdote is that Dr. Damoy was a program director, so I've stepped into his shoes. Big shoes to fill, as you can imagine. But yeah, I'm here helping him with this and moderating. So I'll be your panelist, moderator for this panel. And my goal here is to make this panel the most exciting and informative panel you've been on this issue ever. So I've set myself that goal. So help me with that, right? So I want you to get the most out of this and walk out and talk about this panel for months and months, if not years. So with that goal in mind, I'm sure the panelists will deliver because I know they have excellent credentials. So a show of hands here, this is just for me, not for anything else. Show of hands, how many of you have either known or interacted with an undocumented person? Wow, okay, I did not expect that. Awesome, thank you, thank you. So moving on, let's introduce our panelists. And for this, I have a very, not totally unusual, but somewhat unusual format. I will quickly read out their titles and names. And following, they will tell us one interesting fact about themselves that we may not know from their bios online. I'm sure some of you have looked up their bios. So let's start with Dr. Tai Lei, who is a research scientist at Equity Research Institute at University of Southern California. So fun fact about yourself, Dr. Lei.
Good morning, everyone. A fun fact about myself is I am the 9th child of Vietnamese refugees. My parents really wanted a girl, so they tried 10 times, 9 boys, number 10, they got a daughter.
Wow.
Okay, that's hard to beat. All right, let's keep going. Alvaro de Regil is the executive director of Zu Semper Alliance, which does research on labor and related issues. So Alvaro, fun fact about yourself.
Yes, hello to everyone. I am from Mexico City. I was born and raised there. I came to the U.S. to get a graduate degree in business. And what I can tell you is that from my perspective, for the first 20 years here, I was very naive thinking that, everybody was going to get better. But then I realized that that was not the case. And for the last 20 years, I have spent most of my time I reinvented my life and got involved in social justice and even more so in immigration because I think it is a very important issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Alvaro. Next we have Lindsay Toklowski, who's the co-founder and executive director of Immigrant Defenders Law Center. Lindsay, a fun fact about you.
So I was hoping I could go very last and find out how interesting I needed to make this fact. But one interesting fact is that I actually was in a fine arts theater program initially before dropping out, moving to California, and joining the political science department at San Diego State. So I was in New York City as trying to be an actress initially, and somehow I ended up here in LA as a lawyer.
All right. Thank you. Apollonio Polo Morales is the Deputy Director of Programs and Campaigns, California Immigration Policy Center. Apollo, your fun fact?
My fun fact is I'm named after my grandfather, my great-grandfather, sorry. And so he played guitar, so we have a long-standing history of music in my family, and so that's something that I have tried to push on my 2 kids. So one of them picked up the guitar, so I did one thing right. The other one picked up the piano, which is cool. But yeah, so guitar is a major, key musical instrument in my family, and because of my name.
All right, thank you. Nidia Bayo is the Santa Paula policy advocate at CAUSE. Nidia, fun fact about you.
Hi everyone, my pronouns are she, ella, and fun fact, I have DACA, and I am about to complete my 26th year in the U.S. Yes.
Wow, all right, wonderful. Thank you. That was an excellent round of introductions. So thank you to the panelists. The format I have created, and I have some agreement on this from everybody, is that we have rapid fire questions, one set of questions for each panelist. One round, we go through the entire panel. Then we have time, we do a second round. I have enough questions to last the whole day, so don't worry. So we have 2 rounds of questions, and then we pause at 11:30 to get questions from you, the audience, right? So we have 20 minutes Q&A to democratize the discussion, so we get more questions from you. So take notes, prepare your questions beforehand. So my alarm will go off at 11:30, so just to remind myself, we are getting close, so don't be alarmed. So with that, let's start with Lindsay. And the first question is, why is universal representation in immigration court a fundamental due process issue we should all care about?
Well, I love this question. It's actually the reason that we founded the organization that I run. Universal representation is something that we should all care about because people don't realize that right now in downtown Los Angeles, in Santa Ana, and across the country, we have courtrooms where all sorts of people, little kids who's, are so tiny their feet don't even touch the floor while they're looking at the judge, people who speak indigenous languages, people who the court can't find interpreters for the languages that they speak, people with mental competency issues are representing themselves. Judge Marks, who is a former immigration judge, once said that we're trying death penalty cases in a traffic court setting. And that's absolutely true. When you walk into an immigration court, and they are open, you would never know that because they are often done behind closed doors and people don't realize what's happening. But when you go into an immigration court and the public can go in and sit and watch the hearings, what you see are people's lives on the line. You see people that are fighting for the ability not to be separated from their families, not to be exiled from their communities, and not to be sent, unfortunately, in many cases, to their deaths. And people are going into those courtrooms where their very lives are at stake and representing themselves in cases where the government always has a highly trained, educated attorney to fight to deport them. So we founded our organization, Immigrant Defenders, and we're part, with Polo and many other organizations, CIPC and others, of both a Fairness to Freedom campaign at the national level, where we are trying to get a congressional bill that would actually guarantee the right to representation for all who are facing deportation. Also locally, we have been able in LA County to move forward Represent LA, which, while not universal representation yet, it's on a universal representation model, which means we do not eliminate anyone because of past criminal convictions or because of the complexity of their case. That's really fundamental, that even if we can't represent everyone yet, that we have that universal representation model that we can grow upon that leaves no immigrant behind. And we also have a campaign at the state level that is trying to move this forward, because really there should be no courtroom in the United States where the stakes are so high and people are given absolutely no assistance to protect their due process and human rights.
Thank you. Thank you, Nancy. That was very, very insightful. So what I'm hearing from you is both social justice and economic justice. So using that as a cue, let me turn to Polo and ask him, what does economic justice mean for immigrants?
Yeah, at the most basic level, it's about the ability for folks to be able to support themselves, to support their loved ones. It means access to jobs, to benefits, having an equal footing in our economy. And so, we believe at CIPC that this can be achieved on people's own terms, right? If they have the opportunity that they can succeed, they can advance, they can be able to provide for their families in increasingly more expensive and housing impacted area that is California as a whole. We need to stop pushing people into the corner. And really accept the reality that we cannot function as a society without immigrants, without the labor that they provide, without every contribution that they give us. This state would be a completely different state. And so when we hear about mass deportations, from presidential candidates, we have to question that, right? California sees immigrants a little bit differently. They are a community that is invested in. Why? Because we rely on so much of immigrant labor to be able to have the most basic necessities reach our tables. And so at the most fundamental level, it is about economic justice that is on par with everybody's economic justice. That includes worker rights, that includes access to protections, it includes a way to be able to retire in a dignified way. And so some of those things don't exist for everybody. And so when we talk about economic justice for immigrants, it's really putting that at the same level. And so the other is we want to make sure that folks have access to the services that are going to benefit themselves right now in this moment in time, but also into the future. So we have an aging population of immigrants in California. And so when we think about what does retirement mean for them, it doesn't mean retirement for them. Why you see so many older street vendors is because they are trying to find a way to maintain, right, their livelihood, try to pay the rent that increases annually, trying to put food on the table. So a lot of folks get creative. It's the entrepreneurial immigrant spirit. But increasingly, we're starting to see folks that have dedicated their entire lives to this country working low-wage jobs without that safety net at the end of the day. And when you have that situation, folks cannot retire. And so when you see an 80-year-old pushing a cart down the street trying to sell ice cream, you have to question, where are our values as a society? And so that's what we're trying to push for, is to create that, equal pairing and economic justice for immigrants as well here in California.
Thank you, Paulo. That is insightful. And also based on what Dr. Damoy shared earlier and your comments, the theme that for me emerges is this us versus them mindset, right? Some people are takers, we are the givers, that sort of a framework. So turning to Alvaro, I have a question, which is U.S. Senator John Neely made what some could be considered very racist and exclusionary remark, saying that Mexicans could be eating cat food if not for its proximity to the U.S. So do you think there's any, what's your take on that statement?
Thank you for the question, Savid, because if we're talking about myth and realities, this is the typical myth that can easily be debunked. Besides the racist thing, I can tell you that the reality is exactly the opposite. And I can encapsulate that in the following sentence. And before I say that, let me explain that my research focuses on the reasons why immigrants, and especially in the case of California, Mexicans come here. Why do immigrants come here? Okay, so this Senator Kennedy, he just assumes that, well, because they're very poor and we are rich. And that's the conventional wisdom that is spread in this country. But the fact is that Mexicans actually subsidize the U.S. well-being. Mexicans subsidize the way of living of this country, the good living of this country. And let me show you let me explain two things that demonstrate this. Since the North American Free Trade Agreement passed last century, at the end of last century, more than 2 million jobs in agriculture have been lost in Mexico because with the agreement, U.S. farmers get U.S. subsidies for their production, for their grains, and they flooded the Mexican market at prices below the cost of production in Mexico. So they destroy the agricultural system in Mexico to the point that more than 2 million jobs were lost. And when 2 million jobs were lost, that means about 8 million people in Mexico lost their livelihood. And the only choices that they had were to come here, move to the big cities in Mexico and work in the underground economy, or the last choice was to work for the criminal gangs, like drug traffic gangs. So that is one of the reasons. The other reason is in the manufacturing sector, which is a very important sector in Mexico and a very important sector in the trade, in the connection between the U.S. and Mexican economies. With the North American Free Trade Agreement, corporations moved to Mexico in what is called a system of unequal exchange or labor arbitrage. And what that means is that corporations went to Mexico looking for the cheapest wages that they could find to maximize their profits, to maximize shareholder value, to maximize return on investment. Let me give you a specific example. And it's an example with a question. Why, if workers working for Ford Motor Company in Dearborn, Michigan, put in 3 parts in the assembly line of the Ford Focus, they get the total labor cost for that, the hourly labor cost for that is almost $40. But for the worker working also for Ford Motor Company in Hermosillo, Mexico, put in the exact same parts in the Ford Focus, that worker cost about $5 an hour, okay? So it's about 12%, 14% of the cost of the worker in the US. But does that mean that the cost of living in Mexico is about 12% to 14%? No, the cost of living in Mexico, according to the World Bank, it averages about 60% the cost of living in the United States. So that means that that worker, if the worker in the US is making costs $40 an hour, then the worker in Mexico, in order to be equally compensated, following the principle of equal work, equal wage for equal work of equal value, he should have been paid $24 an hour, but he's only paid $5 an hour. And that's not enough to make a dignified living. So they leave. That's why they come here. So because of these two things, in agriculture and in manufacturing, workers in Mexico subsidize, first of all, the return of investment of corporations in the United States. They also subsidize the wages that corporations in the US pay to their home workers. And finally, the other type of subsidy is that Mexican workers, because of those low salaries, subsidize the prices that we as consumers pay here for many of the products that are imported from Mexico. So what Senator Kennedy said is completely nonsense. It's the opposite. Mexican workers subsidize the cost of living in the United States.
Thank you, Alvaro. A lot to unpack there. I'm sure the research that Dr. May has done and other reports will help shed more light on that as well. So the theme again there that I'm hearing and that has emerged from this comment is the treatment of undocumented immigrants, right? Both here as well as workers in Mexico. So the question to Dr. Lay is, how has the treatment of undocumented immigrants impacted the immigrant community here overall?
There's a lot of ways to really answer this question, but the thing that comes to mind in building off of the presentation from earlier is thinking about the chilling effect. Just from the raise of hands we saw earlier in the room, most of everybody here knows somebody who is undocumented. Undocumented immigrants are really embedded in our community, whether it's in our families or our neighbors or people we interact with every day. And the fact is that these policies and how undocumented immigrants are being treated, detained, hunted down, it has an impact on their families. And we see that in a lot of our research. There's this idea of the chilling effect where undocumented immigrants, even in the state of California, have their lawful right to access certain services. But because of the chilling effect, the fear, they still don't access these life-saving resources. But we can also think about the chilling effect and how that impacts families. Our research on naturalization, for example, for a lawful resident who is eligible to naturalize but lives with somebody who's undocumented are extremely much less likely to actually go through the naturalization process to become a citizen. A lot of that has to do with fear interacting with an immigrant official. Right? We see the opposite is true, where if eligible to naturalize immigrant lives with somebody who is naturalized, it improves their odds of naturalization significantly, right? Because you know how the complex naturalization process works, right? We also see the chilling effect in a lot of different ways in terms of accessing social services, right? In California, even if you are living with someone who is undocumented, you are eligible to access CalFresh or a lot of these other different public services and public benefits, but you still don't because of that chilling effect, because of that fear. In California, there's a huge concern that's coming up. Recently, there has been budget passed to expand CalFresh to undocumented immigrants over the age of 55. There's a huge fear among policymakers that even though we're passing tens of millions of dollars to expand this program, undocumented immigrants who are eligible are not going to use the benefit out of fear. And so California, they're spending millions of dollars to figure out how do we reach these hard-to-reach populations? How do we alleviate the fear? And that's a conversation that we continue to have at the local level, in the community, but also at the state level.
Thank you, Ty, for that. So again, I think the theme there that came to me is the ability to negotiate, the ability to have a stake at the table, so to say, and to get what is a fair wage for your work, right, and for your contributions. So I want to turn to Nidia and ask her, how do you think, again, based on your experience as an advocate for fair wages, how can we increase the median wage for undocumented workers with all these challenges before us that we heard of?
Thank you. So undocumented folks face a lot of issues across many aspects of their lives, including what you mentioned, wages, and they contribute to our economies in different ways, like from working in the fields to warehouses and garment workers in LA. And so I know there's a statewide minimum wage, but these workers that do essential work can also can be given a better wage so that they can have a better life, and actually they need a living wage, and that's something that counties can pass at the county level, and we can advocate for at the county level, because farm workers are doing the essential work of feeding of our community, but they are struggling to make ends meet, and they're struggling to continue to live in Ventura County, especially in the communities that they have lived for historically, like South Oxnard, Colonia, the Boulevard in Ventura, and also in Santa Paula. We have many communities of undocumented workers that are seeing an increase in housing and rent, in groceries and gas prices, but they don't see the same increase in their wages, and so they're struggling to make ends meet and to continue to live in the county. And so the county can really fill that gap so that the workers that live here can continue to live here and do that essential work for our county.
Thank you. Is there any specific campaign or any initiative that CAUSE has undertaken, Nidya? Do you want to share that?
Yes. So in Ventura County, we don't have a living wage campaign, but we do have one in Santa Maria. And so really our work encompasses a lot of things, from our sister organization doing electoral work. And so in Santa Maria, we're a little bit more equipped to advocate for a living wage. And we've seen a lot of farm worker campaigns that have been really successful in Santa Maria. And most recently, we got a farm worker resource program in Santa Barbara County. And so in Ventura County, we're hoping to see a change in the county supervisors so that we can advocate for these living wages for farm workers. But additionally, we do have campaigns that support farm workers and immigrant workers, like tenant protections, because like I mentioned, folks are struggling to live here in Ventura County. And so renters need more protections from rent increases, especially there's a 10% increase in California, but that is too much for our working class folks. And so our cities have the power to implement local rent stabilization to make sure that renters don't, or people that have been renting in our communities continue to live there, as well as including protections from evictions that are not their fault, to discourage evictions that that will lead to gentrification, but also to make sure that renters are protected from evictions that are not their fault.
Well, thank you, Nidia. Again, I think the theme there is one of inclusion and exclusion, right? So I think that's something that you keep hearing. As a qualitative and mixed methods researcher, I see that coming time again beyond the numbers. So to unpack that a little bit, let's turn to Polo and ask him this question: why and how are immigrants excluded from our economic system? Can you go into a little more detail?
Yes, and I will speak a little bit slower for the translator because I tend to go fast sometimes too. So why are immigrants excluded from our economic system? It has to do with immigration status, so whether folks are undocumented or not, whether they're asylum seekers and don't have a specific status quite yet, and even when they do have status, right? It's the fear of it being taken away, like our DACA recipients, folks that have work permits, or folks that have applied for refugee status or have received asylum. It takes a while to get your work permit sorted out, and so those are some of the limitations that exist, at least in a spectrum of that. And not to mention folks that have temporary protective status. Different types of immigration status have different impacts on those particular immigrant communities and their ability to access work and jobs. Having said that, there are some historical exclusions that have existed for generations. The exclusion, or the ability for farm workers to organize a union, or domestic workers goes back to the days of slavery. These are jobs that were, not protected classes, and so we still see that remnants of that history of the United States play itself out, even to this day. And so sometimes you need to get a president of the United States to pressure the governor to provide rights to farm workers to be able to make that case and advance those types of protections. Others are really focused on values, like the California Domestic Workers, the coalition that's been advocating on just basic rights and the tenets of protections, but still working towards expanding those protections to other domestic workers. So this is an ongoing thing. I can tell you, when you have exclusions, when folks are not part of the system, and I'm going to combine a few issues here, so follow me. We have had a lot of rain. And so in Ventura County, I think we've heard a lot of what's happened there. We've had a lot of rain in San Diego. We had a lot of rain in LA. The place where I was able to witness the direct impact of those floodings that took place was in Pájaro, California. And so once Pájaro flooded, the levee broke. Folks were, and this is how the system fails, right? And this is kind of scary because if we're looking at climate change as an issue that we all have to face someday, we're starting to see what happens to the most vulnerable communities. So in Pájaro, California, the county sent an English speaker to tell folks they needed to leave the area. And so 3,000 people needed to be evacuated from that region because the levee had broken. Once the levee broke and this person from the county came to explain what was happening, come to realize that most folks speak an indigenous language, let alone Spanish as their primary language. And so that was the initial kind of break in the system. And then you had, okay, so now folks are no longer able to stay in their homes because it's been flooded, it's full of toxins and everything in the fields, all the way down to sewage. And so folks have to stay in hotels, all this other stuff. A whole system starts to break down. And so when we look at the type of exclusions that prevent people from being able to resettle back, right, to go back and try to, to go back to normal, that normal doesn't exist anymore. So what happened to the immigrant community of Pájaro, the farm workers that lived there? Folks were displaced for many months. And so we start seeing some approaches to that, right? So the governor did provide, flood assistance to folks. The issue there is that nonprofit organizations have to go ahead and disperse the funds to be able to help folks out. The issue that most organizations encountered in Pájaro was a lot of the documents that folks had washed away or they needed to be thrown out. And so proof, right? Number one, that's an issue, right? When we don't have systems in the state to be able to say, you know what, we're going to treat everybody the same here, because when disaster strikes, it doesn't choose, you know, who's it's going to hit, right? It can hit anybody at any moment. And so if we had systems that were inclusive, then we would have a system for folks to be able to have the access readily available to help them out. And so we still see the remnants of that flood. We will see the impacts here in Ventura County, in San Diego, and different regions in California. Those impacts are going to carry a long time. We need to evaluate our systems and really think about, can the state do a better job, or can it explore some creative ways of being able to address these issues before they become a reality? When FEMA is there literally in Watsonville, but they can't help anybody in Pájaro because it hasn't been declared a disaster area, and the majority of the folks there are undocumented, there's a lot of challenges that get created within that. So I can tell you the mental health impact on residents of Pájaro and their children were deep. And in interviewing folks in the community and getting a sense of what they had been through, and realizing that the growers themselves were also suffering, because that flooded area, you can't plant anything on, you can't grow anything on there, so you have to wait till it all dries out, then you got to go back in there and plant the seeds once again. So this has an impact not just on the workers, the undocumented indigenous communities, the folks that are impacted, but also on the basic economy that exists around agriculture in California. And so this is what we have to contend with in the future, is like, let's figure this out together collectively, because if we don't, things are going to get much, much more difficult. Especially, I think there's another storm coming this weekend. So like, if these are going to be more common, or we have really hot times of the year, that's going to have a detrimental impact all across the board. But especially the hardest hit areas are going to be areas of BIPOC communities, people of color, immigrant impacted communities are going to feel the brunt of that first. So I'm going to stop here.
All right, thank you, Polo. I think you got that speaking slowly thing down right there.
Thank you.
Awesome. So we're doing well on time. We have about half an hour left, just doing a quick time check. So I have another set of questions with the theme of looking forward, right? So we are in an election year. So as you know, and as Dr. Damoy pointed out earlier, certain themes come up given the kind of society and the media culture we have. So we will hear more and more of these issues around policy, the border policy, focus on immigration, of course, is one of the leading issues. So with that in mind, and also with more practical solutions in mind, I think the goal of this conference is also to offer practical, doable solutions that all leadership across the government, nonprofit, academic institutions can help and implement. So with that in mind, let me turn to Lindsay and ask her, how has the border policy evolved during the Biden administration, and what does welcoming asylum seekers with dignity look like?
So I think right now, moving into this election year, this is one of the issues that, for many reasons, for both Democrats and Republicans, is at the front of debate, and it's really being weaponized in many ways as a wedge issue, as a way to score political points. And for my organization and the coalitions that we work in, we're welcoming asylum seekers in Los Angeles when buses get sent from Texas, but primarily in the greatest numbers at the border in San Diego. And in fact, tomorrow I'll be driving down after I drop my son at school to be there in a parking lot where we have met since September 13th, when they began releasing people onto the streets in San Diego from Border Patrol custody. It'll be about 82,000 by this weekend. These are huge numbers. So that part of the weaponization of this debate is really the only part that is true, that we are seeing an increase in numbers at the border. The part that is myth about that is, one, what the solutions are. The solution is not to close our border. The solution is to create welcoming and reception systems across our entire border that can welcome people with dignity, that can treat people in the way we would want our own families to be treated, and that can do it in a way that is safe for the communities that are receiving and for the people who are being received. Right now, in San Diego County, I'll use that as an example, there is no welcoming infrastructure that is able to handle the amount of people that are being released to the streets. There is some respite care. There's the San Diego Rapid Response Network. They are incredible. They move mountains. They house about 1,100 vulnerable populations. This is women and children, families with small children, people with medical issues, every single night. 1,100, that's a huge number. But because of the increase in numbers, which I'll just very quickly say is really a result of the border policies that we've had over the last 6 years. Because for so long our border was closed, that led to a backlog of people who were seeking protection at the northern border of Mexico. Because of the CBP-1 app, which is a failed system that created essentially an appointment system for people to get an appointment to save their lives and the lives of their children. Because of a lack of actual welcoming infrastructure across the entire border, what we've seen are these large numbers of people who are ending up on the streets in border cities. It's also by design because it's meant to create political pressure to change border policy. And we see that, even yesterday with leaks from the Biden administration that they're considering a Title 42-like policy. Title 42 was the policy that went into place on March 15th of 2020 that used COVID as an excuse to shut down our border completely to asylum seekers specifically. What I can say is that here in California, welcoming people with dignity means using the resources that we have to ensure that people have their basic humanitarian needs met, and most importantly, that they have the legal information they need to get on their feet and be able to protect their families, which in many cases that, people who are traveling with their children, I can say, having been on the bus with them from Union Station to our Welcome Center in LA, or from, the border to a parking lot. We don't have a Welcome Center in San Diego, but to the parking lot where we're greeting people, the very first question that people often ask is, how can I get a work permit? And I think a lot of what we saw in the presentation earlier and a lot of what my colleagues are talking about, that shouldn't be a surprise. People are not coming because they are looking for charity, because they are looking for anything beyond protection and the ability to care for themselves and their families. So that is true for undocumented immigrants generally in many cases, but it's also true for asylum seekers who are newcomers to the region. And one of the biggest challenges that we face, and one of the biggest challenges to actually allowing people a dignified entrance into our asylum system, is the fact that work permits are incredibly difficult for most asylum seekers to get. And one of the unfortunate things that I have to tell people when they are asking me in those first moments of arriving in the United States, what is the process for me to be able to work legally here in the United States so that I can care for my 3 children who are here with me? And the answer, the very frustrating answer that I have to give as an immigration lawyer is, well, because of the way that you entered the United States, in many cases people enter by the river, by the desert, by the mountain, because there is no other way to do it. We have shelters in Tijuana that we visit weekly where more than 300-400 people have been waiting 6 months for the ability to enter the United States with a CBP-1 appointment. So if that doesn't exist as an option, people have to enter without inspection in order to seek asylum. When that is the case, I have to let people know that the process to seek asylum means you need to first get to your final destination. Second, you need to apply for asylum with the immigration court using a form that's only in English and that is almost impossible to fill out without a lawyer's assistance. Second, the third thing you'll need to do is wait 6 months after you get your receipt notice from that asylum application to fill out another form that costs more than $400. in order to apply for a work permit. And again, that's something that you'll probably need a lawyer's assistance to do. And by the way, representation rates and the ability for people to get pro bono representation has fallen dramatically in the last 2 years. So there are almost no legal resources out there, but those are the barriers that you'll face. And I also have to let people know that realistically, you're looking at 18 months before you actually have a work permit in hand and can use that to go get a job. That's what exclusion from our economic system looks like for asylum seekers, and it would be very easily resolved by a reform of the work permit system, by extension of temporary protected status that gives people access to work permits much more quickly, and by one of the things that's sort of number one on the chopping block in the current negotiations in Congress, which is the parole of people into the United States under executive action and from the president, because in those cases, people are able to access work permits much more quickly and much more easily.
Right. Thank you, Lindsay. I mean, in the sense, I'm also hearing that there's a role for civil society to contribute to solving some of these issues. Nonprofits, community groups, faith-based organizations, and others. So in that sense, I want to turn to Nidya and ask her, as a nonprofit that supports immigrants and specifically also undocumented migrants, what challenges do you foresee in the next year or two specifically?
Yeah, I think I foresee a lot of the same challenges that we have been seeing, but especially being an election year, this is usually when we see an increase of talks of immigration and in news, and also just more conversations around that, from scapegoating immigrants, using them as an excuse to promising things for immigrants. So I think some of the issues that we'll see are around that, but I think continuing to see rent increases, especially since it's still the beginning of the year. We're also, and this is something that we see throughout the year, not just at the beginning as well. Additionally, I think the living wage will continue to be an issue for farm workers. The fact that things, we're experiencing effects of inflation, or just gas prices going up, grocery prices going up, and so I think they will continue to struggle with jobs, finding jobs that pay well, yeah, I think also in terms of environmental justice, we continue to see heavy pollution around our communities of color and immigrant communities specifically, and so that's something that we're continuing to see as well, and so these our communities face these issues, and they have been facing them for a long time, and they will continue to face them. And I think that's why it's so important that we're all here, because schools, government officials, counties, cities can do a lot and can work with community organizations to reach these communities.
Thank you, Nitya. That's helpful. I'll turn to Ty and ask him to share some specific examples or case studies or exemplars, if you will, of projects or initiatives that address economic livelihood and economic well-being generally among undocumented workers. So in your research, have you come across any either in LA County or Ventura County?
There's a lot of wonderful things happening out there. It makes me think about how everyone in this room, we really play a part in pushing for a greater immigrant inclusion. In terms of some examples and case studies that I can think about that really pushes for greater immigrant inclusion and economic inclusion, in the county of LA, we have the Represent LA program, which is publicly funded and also funded by philanthropy. providing merit-blind representation to immigrants who are in removal proceedings or at risk of deportation. The role that the public sector plays is significant when thinking about how public dollars are being used to really help everybody who's part of the community just to feel involved and be part of the community. Right? We had a conversation earlier about all the taxes that undocumented immigrants are paying, but the little benefits that they reap from it, right? The Social Security taxes that they pay that they will never get to touch. I'm gonna pivot away from the question just slightly, just thinking about the idea of changing narrative, because I'm thinking about how I really like the theme of this conference because it's really about changing what the narrative around undocumented immigrants are. Because in order for change to happen, we need to make sure that the narrative shifts so that it shows that immigrants are a key part of our community. We can't pass any policies, we can't pass any laws that is gonna push for greater immigrant inclusion if people don't believe in it. If people feel that immigrants are not deserving of rights, or basic human rights. I look at my colleagues and hear a lot of the things that they're doing at the border, at the Capitol, providing direct services. And so as we continue to think about what changes need to happen, how we change the narrative, it definitely needs to happen at all these different levels. Advocacy at the policy level, building community and organizational capacity, and then still providing direct services to immigrants. And we're still seeing that. We're seeing that, and it shouldn't be overlooked, even at the very local level. And I know a lot of folks might feel that you might not be able to make change at the federal or at the state level, but making change at the local level, it puts pressure on the state and federal level to make change as well. The one example I'm thinking about right now is Santa Ana in Orange County. Undocumented immigrants in Santa Ana are able to be part of commissions, right? That's not true in many parts of the country. Right now, Santa Ana is fighting for undocumented immigrants for their right to vote in local elections. Right? We're seeing in San Francisco, undocumented immigrants have the right to vote in school district elections. So how can we continue to make those changes at all levels so that we can push and change the narrative?
Thank you, Tai. Let's turn to Alvaro and try to pick his brains a little bit on the narratives. So we've been talking about narratives about undocumented workers, narratives about immigrants, narratives about economic contributions, and who should come, who should not come, who should we permit to come, and et cetera. So the question is, it's a little tricky question, but I'll ask him regardless. So what would the solution be in terms of controlling the relentless flow of immigrants from Mexico and other countries, at least from a narrative perspective? How do you see that as a narrative framed? And do you think that migrants should be, there should be policies created to stop the flow of migrants?
Thank you, Sabit. Well, the way I see it is that, we have already millions of immigrants are already here, undocumented immigrants, with all the details that Dr. Damui explained and presented. But we also have this flow that you're talking about of hundreds of thousands of people seeking asylum here, mostly because of economic issues. So in the narrative, to change the narrative, we have to, instead of addressing the symptoms, which are, we're getting millions of new immigrants, we're getting millions of new asylum seekers, we have to address the causes. Why do they come here? And we have to understand that we bear, not all, but most of the responsibility for why they come here. So in order to find solutions, we have to give you to go back to the example of the workers in the manufacturing sector in Mexico. If you don't want workers to keep coming here, immigrants to keep coming here because of economic issues, because they lost the opportunity to enjoy a dignified life in their country of origin, we have to stop taking advantage of them through the economic system that has been imposed, mostly in Mexico, but also in Central America. Okay, so a practical way to do it is, going back to the example of the $40 here and $5 in Mexico, is to gradually close that gap. And I say gradually because the gap is so huge that it's completely unrealistic to attempt to close the gap in 1 year. So it has to be done gradually every year. But the corporations and the government have to commit to do that. And the only way to do that is, in my opinion, is to first inform the citizenry about the real issue, about why they come here. Because like I said, in the media, they never talk about that. And they just let people, you know, in the conventional wisdom, oh, they come here because we are a rich community, we're a rich country, and they are poor. But they are poor because in the global economy, they're being exploited. You know, they're being exploited and they're losing their livelihood, and that's why they come here. If we start providing the opportunities and changing the economic structures so that they can enjoy a dignified life in their country, I can guarantee to you that they would be more than happy to stay in their country. They don't want to come here just because they like coming here. They come here because they have no other choice. Okay, so the practical solution is first to inform the citizenry. And when I say the citizenry, I'm assuming that it's people with good intentions, with good morals, that they really want to favor justice for all. So if they understand that, we can expect that they would put pressure in the government and corporations. There are many ways of doing that. For instance, something at the microeconomic level is consumer boycotts, for instance. But the other one is to lobby the governments, lobby your local government, lobby your federal government. That's the way to do it. Unless we start addressing the causes, the underlying causes of immigration, we will not solve the issue. And that would be the way, at the same time, to help the immigrants that are already here. Because if we stop the flow of new immigrants coming here, then I would think that it would be easier to put pressure to fix the broken immigration system that we have endured for, I would say, decades, and not just years.
All right, perfect. Thank you. Thank you. I never thought this would happen, but I've officially run out of my official questions. So we'll have to, we can do two things. If with your permission, Dr. Mike, we have time. So let's open it up for questions. And if you haven't formulated them yet, I can ask our panelists a quick, again, bullet fire question, rapid round of one policy change that they'd like to see that will benefit undocumented migrants. Within 30 seconds, each one of you, starting with Lindsay, if you could start, please. One change in the next 2 to 5 years you'd like to see.
I'd like to see more restrictions on funding for border security and that money being invested into welcoming with dignity.
Polo?
I would say just looking at the reality of where we're at in terms of the folks that are already living here that are looking for access to opportunity is to invest in and explore changes to our workforce development, our approach as a state, to look at licensing. Folks have the education, as we saw in the report. They just need access. And so licensing would be a good place to start to be able to allow for folks to be able to fill in those jobs. We are experiencing a gray wave of retirement of folks that have been in certain sectors, and AI isn't going to cover all those jobs, but we have a willing workforce that exists, and all we have to do is invest in it.
Ty?
pathways to citizenship for undocumented immigrants. Having citizenship in this country provides not only a sense of security and a sense of belonging, but it provides so much benefit, economic benefit, as well as access to necessary public and social services.
I'd like to see specifically Ventura County stop the voluntary cooperation with ICE. I think that'd be a great way to start, including in making immigrants feel safe in the county, but as well like school boards and cities making intentional effort to include immigrants in all aspects of of the community.
One thing that I didn't, that I forgot mentioning is that the president of Mexico for the last 3 years has been telling the Biden administration that if the U.S. wants to solve the issue, they need to start investing in the communities in Mexico and in Central America. And in fact, Mexico has already been investing millions of dollars in Central America, in the communities, to improve their quality of life in order to reduce immigration. So in the next few years, I'd like to see, Joe Biden has told the President of Mexico that he's thinking about it, but he's been thinking about it for about 2 or 3 years and he hasn't come up with a decision. So what I would like to see is a change in that, in the federal administration. I'd like to see the US government beginning to invest in the communities in Mexico and Central America to address the underlying issues and not the causes.
Thank you. Thank you. That's a rich set of ideas there for us to think about. Let's open it up for Q&A. So if anyone has any question, please feel free to raise your hand. Or if you want to come up here, you're welcome to come up to the mic. Also, I may take this chance to encourage folks on Zoom to ask any questions. Don't be shy. This is your chance. Also, the panelists, if you have any questions for each other, it's not a bad idea to pick each other's brains too, right? So feel free to ask questions. So the floor is open. Sir? You can, let me see. We're getting some help with the mic, but yeah, 1 second.
Thank you. Is this on? I want to follow up on something you spoke about, Lindsay, which is a possible statewide effort to provide universal representation. Can you tell us any more about that? Is there a bill pending? Is there a statewide coalition that we could plug into?
Yeah, and I think Polo would also be great to speak on this, so you could jump in. But there is a coalition. It's called the Rep for All Coalition. This movement here in California, I was actually, when Dr. Lee was talking about Santa Ana, that's actually the home of the very first universal representation program in all of California. That came to be in 2016. And for a long time, it was the only program that was truly universal, that didn't exclude anyone. So I think Santa Ana is a very interesting place for the sort of birth of that movement here in California. It took a long time in Los Angeles for our program to become truly universal in the sense that we don't exclude people with past criminal convictions. At the state level, there is funding for removal defense and deportation defense specifically, but it does exclude people with certain criminal convictions. That is one of the things that Rep for All is trying to do away with, those types of restrictions that both logistically make programs less efficient, but also that do not consider the fact that Black and brown people who are targeted by the immigration system are also unfairly targeted in the criminal justice system and end up with the very convictions, often unjustly, that lead to their involvement in the deportation system. And so excluding them from a state-funded program is really just compounding the victimization in many cases that they had already experienced in the criminal justice system. So at the state level, it is a long-term campaign to both get rid of those criminal carve-outs, as we call them, in the program that exists currently, but also to expand that program. California, if you compare it nationally, is one of the states that has higher levels of representation, but still less than half of immigrants facing deportation will be represented by a lawyer. And when you look at the numbers of those, many of those that make up that percentage are actually unaccompanied minors, because they tend to have a higher rate of representation because there is a federal program through the Office of Refugee Resettlement that provides that representation. But really, when you start to look at particular numbers and when you break it down by the groups that are most disenfranchised from representation, Black migrants, particularly Black migrants who are detained in immigration custody, have the lowest levels of representation. And I point this out to say that when you look at the need for due process for all, and particularly as I hope many of you will get involved with the Rep for All campaign here in California, it is an economic justice issue, it is a due process issue, and it's also a racial justice issue. Because all of the issues that we see, in society as a whole also are there as on a smaller level when it comes to who is getting representation. And again, we're not just talking about who is getting representation in immigration court. We're talking fundamentally about who is allowed to stay and who is being excluded.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add, because Lindsay covered everything, is that this is a campaign, this is an effort, there's a coalition behind it, and it really is about, making that distinction that I think has been kind of blurred out through many years, is that an immigration is a civil offense and not a criminal offense. And I think folks have forgotten that because of our media and the way that folks talk about immigration. But in that same spirit of access for everybody, you should have access to an attorney if you're facing a judge. And that's just the bare minimum that we can provide for folks, but it is a long battle that we continue to fight to make sure that the state is investing in that infrastructure and to provide legal services in areas of the state where there's very little infrastructure or attorneys to be able to help with deportation defense as well.
I have a question for Lindsay. If I understood earlier, you mentioned that there has been a decrease in the availability of pro bono immigration lawyers. Why is that?
So it's a twofold issue, really. One is that the number of people facing deportation in the United States has skyrocketed. The numbers are stunning. In California, when I started practicing 15 years ago in Los Angeles, there were very few pro bono legal service providers. In fact, there were almost none that provided, even to unaccompanied children, pro bono legal services. It was very small, but there were tens of thousands of people facing deportation. Now, nationally, there are millions of people facing deportation, and in Los Angeles alone, we have backlogs of more than 150,000 people in the region who are currently in deportation proceedings. So to meet that need, we would have had to, 15 years ago, be targeting law schools, be looking at ways that we could actually have a public defender system for immigrants that was able to meet that need. Also, the people who are facing deportation in California, the profile has changed. 10 years ago, we saw way more Central Americans as the newcomers and the asylum seekers. At the border tomorrow, I will probably see 30 different nationalities, people from Africa, a huge number of people from Venezuela, from Cuba, from all, and from Asia, from all over the world. And that means that immigration attorneys need to speak more languages. We need more interpreters. The system itself, often a huge number of people have arrived to California from Mauritania. They speak a language pular, which is extremely hard to find interpreters. I sat in an immigration court in Van Nuys a few weeks ago and watched as 10 people without lawyers, all from Mauritania, all who spoke pular, went up and spoke to a judge who didn't have an interpreter that they could understand, and he reset their cases for another day and handed them all a piece of paper in English that told them what day they need to come back. That is what happens when you don't have a system that has adapted for the world that's around it, and that has not grown the number of attorneys that are available to do this work. In that case, I should also just mention that for those men who were given that hearing in a language, on a piece of paper in a language they can't understand, to come back, if they don't make it back to court, which we know if they have a lawyer, they are much more likely to make it back to court. But if they don't make it back to court because they don't understand that, they will be ordered deported in their absence, which means that then the next time that they have any sort of interaction with Immigration and Customs Enforcement or the criminal justice system, they will likely be taken into immigration custody and put in detention and fast-tracked for deportation. That's regardless of what the facts of their case are, because that judge couldn't understand the facts of their case without an interpreter, and they didn't have a lawyer who could actually tell the judge what the issues are, or fight for them to be able to tell their story. So it's really a factor of both more people there and also a lack of investment, long-term investment in lawyers to do this work.
So what happens if there is no interpreter? Does the judge make an arbitration decision, an arbitrary decision?
So what I've seen is that in most cases, if there is no interpreter, and I have seen this particularly with the influx of Mauritanians to the US, the judge just continues to continue the case, which leads to more people in immigration court. It leads to a furthering of the backlog. Currently, just yesterday, we had a joyous moment in our office where one of our unaccompanied minor clients who arrived here 8 years ago, she's now a junior at UCLA, her green card finally came in the mail. She won her asylum case 2 years ago, but I repeat, she arrived in the United States 8 years ago as a child, and her green card just came in the mail today, a clear case of asylum, a clear win, but just in a normal process, that's how long it takes. Because, when I said earlier that we should be, taking funds from border security and investing them in Welcome with Dignity, that means both the infrastructure for welcoming at the border, but it also means in having a fair adjudication of asylum claims, which means lawyers for everybody. It also means having enough people hearing those claims and doing it in a way that doesn't just put people into a system that's going to trap them in this, in a state of unknowing for 10 years before they get a decision in their case. Our cases don't need to be heard in an adversarial setting. They could be done in asylum offices with asylum officers. All of those types of things would lead to faster adjudications and would lessen the need for lawyers, where in an immigration court system, you absolutely need a lawyer for everybody for it to actually be a fair process.
Thank you, Nancy. Sorry, that was my alarm telling us officially the time for the panel is over, but Q&A we can continue. We have 20 minutes more, so please, if you have any questions.
Yeah, I wanted to ask Lindsay regarding the border situation now that more folks seem to be coming through. I remember a few years ago, there was all over the news, you would hear, and there was actually a picture at the beginning of the panel about the separation of families at the border. And I know that over here in Ventura County, there was a lot of awareness of that. We were trying to find ways to support the families, and then everywhere you would hear the word kids in cages. Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking with everything that's happening there, what is the situation with that, with the separation of families? Are youth getting separated from their families? What can we do to support, to help the situation over there?
So I'm sure some of my co-panelists can speak to this as well. families continue to be separated at our border every single day. In fact, since September, we've had a station at the makeshift welcome center in a parking lot that is specifically there to assist people who've been separated from their families during processing in the San Diego region. We work with another organization, Al Otro Lado, that has been specifically working with these families because people are separated while in Border Patrol custody, and sometimes we have people that are released. The dad of a family will be released in Riverside County, and the mom and the kids in San Diego. Or even worse, the father or the mother will be put on a lateral flight to Texas and released into El Paso, and the rest of the family is here in San Diego. We do not see at the same level what we saw during zero tolerance in the Trump administration, where children are being systematically ripped from their parents at the border. But what I always try to remind people is that zero tolerance changed one aspect of family separation in our immigration system. When that ended because of the rightful outrage at children being ripped from their parents at the border, that ended one form of family separation. But it doesn't end the fact that when people are plucked off our streets here in California and put into immigration detention, they don't have due process, they don't have a lawyer, and they are deported. That creates a permanent family separation that has ripple effects in our communities that is just as impactful as the family separations that so dramatically were stopped during zero tolerance. And I know that everyone here can likely talk about examples of that in our immigration system currently, just absurd ways that families are separated, both at the border and in our communities. And I think that, when we talk about immigration reform, what we really need to talk about is how do we make sure that our system is designed to preserve family units, that our system is designed to make families stronger and not separate them. If we look at the changes and the systemic changes that need to be made from that perspective, what is possible? It is, certainly not what we see at the border right now, and not what we see in our immigration courts, our detention centers, and in our communities when we see ICE picking people up or preventing people from working to take care of their families. There's just so many aspects that are leading to that family separation still.
Okay, please.
Sorry, Lindsay, you continue to be in the hot seat. But earlier, you had mentioned we needed to invest in immigration attorneys. And my question to you is, what can we do and what should law schools be doing to promote this? And the reason why I bring this up is my fiance has a law degree from Pepperdine. I'm sorry to call out anyone. And she's biracial. She's very passionate about social justice. She got several certificates in D&I along with her law degree. As part of her law journal, she published an article on the HARE Act and her experiences with racism and discrimination. She was actively discouraged through her entire law experience to pursue immigration as a career because it's emotionally scarring, it's difficult, it's not going to pay well, it's not prestigious, etc. Many of which are myths. So if that's the environment you're getting your law degree in, what can we do, both as educators, as society, etc., to really change that narrative and to really promote people to get into that, because there's a critical shortage of those skilled individuals?
Yeah, I think, there's a critical shortage of social justice lawyers generally. Not just in immigration, but across the board. But I will say that specifically for immigration, one of the biggest barriers to entry for immigration lawyers and pro bono immigration lawyers is lack of lawyers who have language abilities, who specifically here in California can speak Spanish. One of the things that we've done at IMDEF to try to combat that is we actually created a Spanish immersion program for lawyers at our office. And so we're on our second cohort of this now, but starting last January, we had a group of 7 lawyers who we hired. Many of them were heritage Spanish speakers, but had not spoken Spanish in many years. All of them spoke another language. Some of them spoke Mandarin. I think one of them spoke French. And what we did is that for their first 6 months at IMDEF, half the time they're being lawyers, and half the time, for about 20 hours a week, they're in Spanish immersion classes. We've been testing this model to see if this is a way to break down one of the barriers that I think many law students are thinking, I would really like to do that work, but I am now, about to take the bar exam. I can't possibly learn another language on top of figuring out how to be a lawyer. And this is one way that we can encourage people to and kind of pull people in. But I think generally the idea of people being discouraged from doing this work also has to do with the fact that even within the public interest sector, immigration lawyers tend to be the lowest paid. And I think that is really just sort of a historical vestige of what society is saying we value. So one of the things that we've also done is try to talk about that, for immigration lawyers, they should be paid the exact same as the prosecutors that are in that courtroom. I can tell you they're not paid anywhere near what the prosecutors are paid in that courtroom. But ultimately, as we create state and local programs that are designed to really build up that bar of public defender immigration lawyers, there should be parity of pay, at least with public defenders in the criminal justice system, so that this is a long-term career choice that people see as something that they can do for their entire careers. One of the reasons that I think people discourage folks from doing it is that it's hard to see a long-term career path when you're starting out at the very lowest paid law category you can go into.
Yeah, and if I can just add a little bit, so the state does have pilot programs, especially for building out some capacity in different parts of the state, like Bay Area attorneys going into the Central Valley, like in Fresno, to be able to build out the expertise there, to have folks that are local to be able to do the work there. But those programs and reaching out to other ethnic communities as well are on the chopping block this year in terms of the budget process. And so what we're trying to do this year is to ensure, let's keep the pilot programs because we're going to need them. The future is uncertain. The election is coming up very soon, and the talking points around immigration are changing. And so we have to find ways to be able to reach those hard-to-reach communities, invest in the future attorneys here in the state of California, because we want to make sure the families are going to stay united and they're going to stay together. So that's something that we're going to be advocating and protecting for this year as well.
And I'll add as well. So our research center right now, we're currently doing an evaluation with immigrant lawyers who are providing merit-blind representation. Across the board, burnout is huge. And even though they're getting additional funding, it's not enough. With the backlog that Lindsay was talking about, a lot of these lawyers are working 10, 20 cases a week. And the cases themselves are extremely traumatic, and so they internalize a lot of that and feel that burnout. And so for a lot of the immigrant lawyers that we're seeing going into the field because they want to help, because they feel passionate, because they have that pro-social motivation, they're getting burned out and leaving the profession. And so thinking about building capacity, how can we not only continue to fund these initiatives and representation, how can we be sure to support these immigrant lawyers doing the hard work?
All right, we have 6 minutes left. Any more questions? Yes, I see a hand up there.
I'll keep it brief because I saw two hands also go up. For everyone on the panel, given that we do have a lot of city officials here, maybe some government officials, what would be some advice that you would give them to uplift efforts within their city districts or county districts? I know many cities in Ventura County are moving to having district elections to have representation, to allow the opportunity for those that do want to run, opportunity to run within their neighborhoods and have representation. But what other advice could you provide to these elected officials to understand the importance of that? Because many times efforts like that turn into pushback against each other on a board, or sometimes pushback against certain parts of the community. So the importance of that, especially if we're uplifting the population that we were discussing today, and also given that this community particularly contributes to their community in different ways without having that tax benefit back. Thank you.
Okay, any last questions? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to advocate for inclusionary practices across all areas and across all governments. I think that, for example, when we're talking about district elections, our immigrant communities and documented immigrants specifically, like there's still a fear of government and a fear of putting your information out there and being unfamiliar with a lot of these processes. So I want to encourage like city officials to to think about how we can include these populations when we're doing our work, and when we want to reach these folks, how can we reach them where they're at, knowing that most of them are working full time and long hours, and they need childcare and they need access to food, good food, right? And so how can we meet these people where they're at so that they can understand the processes of government, but also how the city works, and also like, and maybe in that way also reach more programs that could help them build capacity and to become more I want to say that immigrants have been part of our communities for a very long time. So how can we, as a society, include them more into our everyday lives? Yeah.
Thank you, Nidhya. So we'll take one last question, sir. I think you had your hand up somewhere at the back. Yeah, please go ahead.
I'm not sure this is a good last question. So in talking about changing the narrative and also trying to find quote unquote solutions, I've been involved in one way or another kind of with immigration work for over 20 years now, and I'm mildly pessimistic, and for a variety of reasons. So while acknowledging how the hardships and the struggling and the violence and for the migrants themselves, we really have I don't know how many wins it is, but it's like a win-win-win-win-win-win-win system. So we have nation states that are looking after their own self-interest. So we talked about today how the U.S. gains because we have a lot of migrant labor and people coming here and contributing economically in a whole bunch of different ways. We have remittances going to the country of Mexico. They also have people educated in the United States going back to Mexico, a benefit to them. We've mentioned the two political parties who both of them get a lot of bang for the buck out of immigration. We have nonprofits and all sorts of different things. There's a ton of money in immigration reform work. A lot of people here are involved in that. The migrants themselves, a lot of them do gain. They come or migrate to different places, and they do get economic benefits, family benefits, educational benefits. So, and I can go on. So I haven't written this down for a while, but I think I'm up to like 11 wins. So it's going to be real challenging to change kind of the model if we have nation states without fluid borders where you can have easier motion to make kind of meaningful changes as long as so many people benefit. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was a statement or a question?
I think a bit of both. Yeah. Does anyone want to? Do the panelists want to quickly give a 30-second closing remark, and then we'll have Dr. Dumoy come over and offer the official closing remark.
Yeah, I wanted to speak to that because it is. I mean, the bottleneck is Congress. It has always been Congress. We haven't had meaningful immigration reform since 1986, and so when we talk about this football that gets played every election cycle, and who can be the most anti-immigrant, who can be the most pro-immigrant, which side are you on? None of this has ever resulted in a solution. So I share that pessimism in that regard. I do see, however, that it takes generations for folks to make it in this country, right? That's just a fact, and that every immigrant that has come to this country, whether it was turn of the century or 1850s, there was different standards for becoming a citizen back then. 1850s, 1860s, you want to become a citizen? Can you get somebody to write a letter for you that says, yes, I want to become a citizen? Citizen. Now, It's impossible. And so as long as we have bottlenecks and systems that don't work and don't function, and they're created in a way to reap political benefits for either side, we're not going to see this solved. And so what is it going to take? It's going to take, I think, states like California trying to find some alternatives and really pushing the ball as far as it can go in terms of inclusion, and really recognizing that we can actually all have a win-win situation that is beneficial to everybody in our society. Now, does Texas see it that way? Probably not. Does Florida see it that way? Probably not. I would say it has a lot to do with the current politics, the state of politics that we have, in this issue not being addressed the way that it needs to be addressed. But we can be beacons of light. We can demonstrate that we have a different way of doing things that doesn't require denigrating or putting down, or talking about mass deportations and putting people in camps. I think there are better alternatives than that.
The work isn't easy. The work is definitely not easy when it comes to promoting immigrant rights. What I'll say is, and I'll answer both the last two questions, is to count the small wins as well. The small wins are important, especially at the local level. Even though it might seem like an incremental approach rather than radical, those small wins lead to bigger wins. And what we want to do is try to empower folks at the very local level to make those changes, whether it's city officials, county officials, or even organizations. And so what I would always encourage is trying to make all that information, all of that knowledge, all those stories available. So at our research institute, we democratize the data. And so for any organizers, any city officials, anybody who's interested in making sure that you have the data to push for change, you can go to our website. We have multiple dashboards, including the California Immigrant Data Portal, where you can play around with the data so you can see what those different intersections are. For example, if you're interested in pushing for policies for undocumented immigrants from Asia, right, we have that data. So you're able to see what language accessibility looks like. Right? If you want to push for greater economic inclusion for refugees, we have that data. And you might need that data to convince the policymakers that this is a policy we need to push for. Right? And so count those small wins, because those small wins are going to keep us in the game. Because otherwise, if we don't count the small wins, we're going to get burnt out and we're going to just leave, and there's going to be nobody else here to fight.
Nidia, any closing remarks?
I was thinking about how nonprofits and a lot of this work, there is a lot of money in it now, but we also need to fund this work a lot more, specifically like legal services, and that our community needs, and it's hard for them to access, especially here in Ventura County. There's very little legal aid, free legal aid, and I think we really need to fight against hate and discrimination, and one way we can do that is by including or advocating for inclusionary policies and practices, and we've seen that in the state, and that gives me some hope that we are now including everyone to have access for health. With Health for All, and so that's one way that we're slowly changing the way that immigrants are being seen, and that the fact that everyone deserves access to healthcare and food and legal services. And so I think the more we can do these type of practices, the more that immigrants will be seen as part of our communities that we are.
Thank you. Alvaro?
Well, I would like to say that going back to the specific aspect of why people come here, that and assuming the majority of people, I'm not talking of California specifically, but in general, in the entire country, would prefer for the floods of immigrants, of new immigrants, to stop. As a first step, we would need to change the narrative. And in order to change the narrative, we really need to make an effort using information to re-educate the people, to tell them in many cases that they're completely wrong, that we are in a very important degree the cause that triggers them to come here. So we need to address the root cause instead of just concentrating on the symptoms. In other words, if you want people to stop coming here, let's address the root cause and not the symptoms.
Thank you, Alvaro. And Lindsay, we'll let you have the last word.
Well, so much of what everybody here just said resonates with me. I would just say, you know, especially for local elected officials who are in the room, for students, for all of us, we really can only do what's within our control. We can try and, you know, push out what our area of control is through advocacy, but you know, we can't control what Governor Abbott does in Texas, but we can control how we receive buses here in California. We can't control all of the factors that are leading to, you know, people fleeing. I mean, Venezuela alone, 7 million people fleeing a country that is south of here. That has been unprecedented in our lifetimes. And so when we're not talking about that as the context for the increased numbers at the border, we're really missing a huge part of that context. We can't control all of those geopolitical factors that are happening always, although we have a lot of responsibility in them, and there is, you know, nationally things that need to be done. But what we can control is how we greet people at our border here in California. And same with our immigration system. Our immigration system, our laws are unjust, immoral, and broken in our immigration courts, and we're fighting to change that. But what we can change in this moment is whether people have to sit and be subject to that by themselves, or whether we can continue to fight on the local level to have a lawyer that brings even a small percentage of humanity into that inhumane system in a courtroom. And so for me, I would just say that, you know, it is worth it for all of us to do every single thing that's within our personal power to make things incrementally better, because all of us doing that and being that beacon of light here in California, it will eventually spill out and, you know, change what we need, which is national systemic change to welcome people with dignity, to make, you know, the systems actually work for immigrants, to make the system more just.
All right, that's a great way to end this exciting panel. Big round of applause, please. May I hand it over to Dr. Damoy.
Yeah. Thank you, Sebi. Thank you so much. And I'm just going to ask panel if you could kindly stay there. We have a little present for you from CLU. So William is coming around with that. And while we have a few minutes, let me thank you again for this possibility, this occasion, this opportunity to get engaged in one of the very important issue about social justice, more than anything else, in California. And hopefully that would be actually we started last year on that, continue that conversation. I can promise you one thing. You will receive a MailChimp like the ones that you have seen, and it has all sections, and there is videos, and there are, you know, recording of this. There are going to be a lot of things. Professor Salimi is there and wants to interview some of our panelists. Please, if you just can, you know, kind of, when you go in there, you know, give him a little time for that. And please, we talk about changing the narrative. We talk about staying informed. And let us, everybody here, because this is really important, be that agent for positive change. And I like to say that, you know, we come back again here and maybe in other places, in other universities, in other centers, other nonprofits for this kind of discussion to explore things further and stay together connected. So with that, they're going to see a QR there. Kindly go there and give us a little bit, you know, your wisdom, your ideas, so we can do better. And I want to thank you all on our panelists. Thank you so much. I learned a lot from listening to you. I hope that we can stay in touch with you and we can work together more on other occasions that come up. And thank you all again. Have a wonderful day. Bye.